The chains around her wrists were not meant to hold prisoners. They were meant to measure worth. Every servant in the kingdom of Varethel knew that. Silver oath chains only tightened around those considered beneath dragon blood. They were forged centuries ago during the first dragon wars, enchanted to burn liars, thieves, traitors, and humans foolish enough to stand before royal fire. Tonight, every noble in the kingdom had gathered to watch the chains decide whether Lyra Vale deserved to remain inside the palace walls. The great hall glowed beneath thousands of crimson candles. Dragon banners hung from black stone pillars. Golden braziers roared along the walls, filling the chamber with smoke and heat thick enough to choke weaker lungs. At the center of it all stood Lyra, barefoot, bound, alone. The silver chains wrapped around her pale wrists shimmered faintly beneath the firelight, as whispers spread through the royal court like poison through water. The prince kept her far too long. She should have been dismissed years ago. A human girl serving the royal bloodline was always an insult. She has no dragon mark, no scent, no bond, no worth. Lyra lowered her eyes, though not from shame. If she looked toward the throne, she feared the last piece of herself might finally break. Because standing there beside the obsidian steps was the only person she had ever truly trusted. Prince Kael Draven. He looked carved from shadow and flame, tall enough to tower over the royal guards surrounding him, dressed in black ceremonial armor edged with molten gold. His dark hair brushed the collar of his cloak, and the dragon crest branded across his throat glowed faintly beneath the torchlight like dying embers beneath ash. He did not look at her. That hurt more than the chains. For 7 years, Lyra had served him as an oath-bound servant after her father died defending the northern borders. 7 years of sharpening his weapons, tending dragon scales after battle, carrying messages through blizzards no noble would survive. 7 years beside a man who rarely spoke gently to anyone, except her. And now, the entire kingdom had gathered to witness him sever their bond publicly. The high priestess stepped forward first. Seraphine of the Ember Temple wore robes the color of fresh blood. Gold symbols lined her throat and wrists, marking her as the highest spiritual authority in Varethel. The entire court bowed when she moved. Even dragons feared her. Her cold eyes slid toward Lyra, with carefully hidden disgust. "By royal decree," Seraphine announced, her voice echoing through the hall. "The human servant known as Lyra Vale stands accused of contaminating the sacred bloodline of House Draven." A murmur spread instantly. Lyra felt her pulse stumble. Contaminating? She looked up sharply toward Kael for the first time. His jaw tightened. Still, he said nothing. Seraphine continued smoothly. "For months, strange weaknesses have spread among the royal dragons. Hatchlings refuse food. Ancient fires dim. The bond between prince and beast weakens. Our sacred rites reveal corruption within the palace itself." Her gaze settled on Lyra. "The corruption began when the human girl entered the prince's inner court." The nobles immediately erupted into whispers. Lyra's stomach twisted violently, not because she feared death, because Kael still remained silent. The prince finally descended the obsidian steps. The room quieted instantly. Every noble straightened. Every guard lowered their head. Even Seraphine stepped back. That was the effect Kael Draven had on people. He did not need to raise his voice to inspire fear. He simply existed. Kael stopped directly before Lyra, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his skin. Dragon blood. Royal blood. Dangerous blood. His gaze finally met hers, and for one terrible moment, she saw conflict there. Not hatred, not cruelty. Something worse. Restraint. "You should not have come beneath the castle," he said quietly. The words struck her harder than any blade, because she had only gone there once. One accidental moment 3 nights ago, while searching for a missing servant child near the lower catacombs. She hadn't told anyone, except him. Lyra swallowed carefully. "The child was crying. That place is forbidden." "I know." "Then why enter it?" "Because no one else would." The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut flesh. Kael stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached forward slowly. The entire court leaned closer. His fingers brushed the silver chain wrapped around her wrist. Instantly, the chains glowed red. Pain exploded through Lyra's arms. Gasps erupted throughout the hall. The chains only reacted that way when touching cursed blood. Lyra collapsed to one knee, biting back a cry as heat scorched her skin. But such even, far worse happened next. The dragons outside began screaming. Every torch in the throne hall violently extinguished. Darkness swallowed the court. Then came the roar. Not from outside, from beneath the castle. The entire palace trembled. Stone cracked overhead. Nobles screamed as dust rained from the ceiling. Kael spun instantly, one hand flying toward the sword at his side. "What did you awaken?" Seraphine hissed. Lyra stared downward in confusion and fear, because beneath the burns spreading across her wrists, a faint white glow pulsed beneath her skin, and somewhere deep below the palace, something ancient had just awakened. The roar came again, closer this time. Not angry, hungry. The dragons chained within the royal towers answered immediately, shrieking in panic loud enough to shake the mountain itself. Then, every dragon in Varethel bowed their heads toward the floor, toward her. And for the first time in recorded history, Prince Kael's royal dragon refused his command. For one breath, no one moved. Then the throne hall shattered into chaos. Noblewomen screamed beneath fallen curtains of ash. Lords stumbled away from the center aisle, clutching jeweled cloaks over their faces as cracks spidered across the black marble floor. Guards rushed toward the doors, but the great bronze hinges groaned shut before anyone touched them, sealing the court inside, as if the palace itself had decided no witness would be allowed to flee. Lyra remained on one knee, arms burning, wrists trapped in glowing silver chains that now pulsed not red, but white. Not the warm gold of royal dragonfire, not the crimson flame of House Draven. White, cold, ancien, impossible. Kael stared at the light beneath her skin, as though he were watching his own death take form. "Stand behind me," he ordered. The words were low, sharp, instinctive. For one foolish heartbeat, Lyra almost obeyed. Then she remembered where they were. She remembered the chains, the accusation, the silence he had given her while the court stripped her name apart. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her eyes to him. "Am I still permitted to stand, Your Highness?" The question struck harder than any scream in the hall. Kael's face tightened. Before he could answer, Seraphine swept between them like a blade cutting silk. "No one touches her," the High Priestess commanded. "Not even you, my prince." Kael did not look away from Lyra. "Move." Seraphine's expression remained calm, but the priests behind her drew crescent knives from beneath their robes. Their blades had been dipped in temple oil, black and shimmering, made for one purpose only, to cut dragon bonds. "She carries forbidden contamination," Seraphine said. "You saw the chains. You heard the beast beneath the castle. This human has opened something older than the crown." Lyra forced herself to rise. The motion tore a gasp from her throat, but she swallowed it before the court could enjoy it. "I opened nothing," she said. Seraphine turned to her slowly. "Then explain why the royal dragons bowed." "I cannot. Convenient. I searched for a child, who is no longer here to confirm your mercy." The words landed with quiet cruelty. Lyra's blood went cold. The missing servant child, Mara, a kitchen girl with frightened eyes and a habit of hiding bread in her sleeves. Lyra had found her 3 nights ago near the forbidden stairwell, sobbing that something below the palace had called her name. Lyra had taken her back upstairs, wrapped her in a cloak, and sent her to the servant dormitories before telling Kael what had happened. Now Mara was gone, and Seraphine knew exactly how much that would wound. Kael's gaze flicked toward the priestess. "Where is the child?" Seraphine gave a slight bow. "Safe within the temple, for questioning. Return her. When the temple is satisfied, she has not been touched by the same corruption." A growl moved through Kael's chest. Not human. Not fully dragon. It rolled through the hall with enough force to silence every whisper. For the first time, Lyra saw fear flash through Seraphine's eyes. Then it vanished. "My prince," she said softly. "Control yourself." Something dark rippled beneath Kael's skin. The dragon mark at his throat flickered. Not bright, not strong. Flickered. Lyra saw it. So did Seraphine. And in that tiny failure of flame, Lyra understood there was another trial happening in this room. One no one had spoken aloud. Kael was weakening. The stories had reached even the servants' hall. Royal dragons refusing food, flames dimming in the rookery, eggs turning cold in their nests. Everyone blamed bad omens, rival curses, northern storms. But Seraphine had blamed Lyra, and Kael had allowed it. The realization hollowed something inside her. The prince stepped closer to the priestess. "You will not bleed her in my hall." "Your hall?" Seraphine asked quietly. A dangerous silence followed. The nobles stopped breathing. Seraphine lifted her hand toward the dark ceiling, where the enormous iron chandelier still swung from the quake. "This hall belongs first to fire, then to blood, then to crown. If the blood falters, the temple speaks before the throne." Kael's hand tightened around his sword. Lyra felt the room tilt toward violence. Then the floor beneath her feet pulsed. Once, like a heartbeat. Every candle reignited at once. Not red, not gold, but white. The court cried out. The silver chains around Lyra's wrists snapped loose and fell to the floor. The sound was small. The meaning was not. No oath chain had ever broken on its own. For a moment, Lyra simply stared at her freed hands, at the burned skin beneath the silver marks, at the strange pale light threading through her veins like moonlit rivers beneath ice. Then something beneath the castle called again, not with sound this time, with feeling, a pull in her blood, a memory that did not belong to her. Stone stairs, a sealed door, an egg larger than a war shield, sleeping in darkness under roots of ancient bone. A dragon curled around it long ago, white as winter dawn, dying with its wings spread over the shell to keep it warm. Lyra staggered. Kael caught her before she fell. His hands closed around her shoulders. Heat rushed through her. For the first time in years, she felt the full force of his touch, without gloves, armor, or ceremony between them. His eyes searched her face with something almost like fear. "What did you see?" She wanted to push him away. She wanted to lean closer. Both desires warred so violently in her chest that she could barely breathe. "An egg," she whispered. The court went utterly still. Kael's grip tightened. "Where?" Lyra's voice shook. "Below." Seraphine's expression changed. Only slightly. But Lyra saw it. The high priestess was not surprised. She was terrified. And that terrified Lyra more than the roar. "You knew," Lyra said. Seraphine's mouth hardened. Kael turned on the priestess. "What is beneath my castle?" The answer came from the oldest noble in the room, Lord Valor of the Eastern Cliffs, whose family had served House Draven since the first conquest. His wrinkled hands trembled around his cane. "No," he breathed. "It cannot be." Kael faced him. "Speak." Lord Valor looked at Lyra as if seeing a ghost. The white vault. Seraphine's voice cut through the room. Silence. But the old lord had already gone pale. "It was sealed before your grandfather's reign, before the Ember Temple rose, before the red dragons claimed the throne." The floor pulsed again. The white candles bent toward Lyra. Lord Valor whispered, "The last celestial dragon egg." A sound moved through the court, half horror, half prayer. Lyra knew enough of old songs to understand why. White dragons were not simply beasts. They were judges, kingslayers, makers of queens. They appeared only when a royal bloodline had broken faith with the ancient law, and every record claimed they had gone extinct. Kael released Lyra, as though her skin had burned him. The motion was small. She felt it anyway. Seraphine seized the moment. "Now you understand. The creature beneath us is not salvation, it is judgment. If that egg wakes, every royal claim in Verithel will be questioned. Every border lord will rebel. Every rival alpha beyond the Ash Mountains will smell weakness. Kael's gaze remained fixed on Lyra. His voice was cold. Why would it answer her? The question should not have hurt. It did, because beneath the suspicion, beneath the command, there was the old wound again. Human, servant, oath-bound, never equal, never chosen, only useful, until impossible things began happening. Seraphine stepped closer, sensing the crack. Because forbidden blood calls forbidden creatures, let the temple take her below. If she truly knows nothing, the egg will remain asleep. And if it does not? Kael asked. Seraphine looked directly at Lyra. Then we cut her before it hatches. Lyra's breath caught. Kael said nothing. The silence stretched. 1 heartbeat. 2, 3. Something inside Lyra closed. Not angrily, not dramatically, quietly, like a door being locked from the inside. She looked at the prince she had followed. Through snowstorms, battlefield smoke, and lonely palace corridors. The prince whose nightmares she had heard through stone walls. The prince whose dragon she had fed when it refused every royal handler. The prince who once placed his cloak around her shoulders during winter patrol and said nothing because kindness from him always arrived disguised as command. Now he stood in a room full of people waiting to decide whether her blood deserved to be spilled. And still he hesitated. Lyra stepped away from him. I will go below, she said. Kael's eyes sharpened. No, she almost laughed. There was no humor in it. You do not get to command me after letting them chain me. The words rang through the throne hall. A few nobles gasped, more shocked by her defiance than by the dragon beneath the castle. Kael's expression darkened. You think defiance will save you? No. Lyra lifted her burned wrists, but obedience did not. For the first time, the dragon prince had no answer. Seraphine smiled faintly, as if Lyra had just stepped exactly where she wanted her. Then let the human descend, the priestess declared. Let fire, blood, and crown witness the judgment. The bronze doors opened with a sound like thunder. Beyond them waited temple guards, black-robed priests, and a narrow procession of royal soldiers holding lanterns filled with blue flame. At the far end of the corridor, beneath banners trembling in a wind that should not exist indoors, a stairway had opened in the floor. Ancient steps spiraled down into darkness. Lyra began walking before fear could root her in place. Behind her, the court followed. The nobles came because power demanded witnesses. The priests came because secrets feared daylight. The guards came because commands were easier than conscience. And Kael came last. Silent, dangerous, unwilling to protect her in public, unable to let her go alone. The descent beneath the castle was colder than Lyra expected. The upper palace had always smelled of smoke, iron, and dragon oil. But below the foundations, the air tasted clean and bitter, like winter stars. Frost lined the stone walls in delicate patterns despite the mountain's volcanic heart. Ancient carvings appeared as the procession moved deeper. Dragons with feathered wings, women wearing crowns of antler and flame, wolves kneeling beside serpents of light. This place did not belong to House Draven. It belonged to something older. Lyra touched one carving as she passed. The stone warmed beneath her fingertips. The white glow in her veins answered. Kael noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. You have seen these symbols before, he said quietly, walking beside her now despite Seraphine's displeasure. Lyra kept her eyes forward. No. Then why do they answer you? I do not know. You expect me to believe that? She stopped. The entire procession halted behind them. Slowly, she looked up at him. No, she said. I expect you to believe whatever keeps your throne safest. Kael flinched. Not visibly enough for the court, but enough for her. His voice dropped. You think that is what this is? What else could it be? His eyes burned, though the mark at his throat remained dim. You do not understand what waits below. Neither do you. His jaw tightened. For one breath, the prince looked less like a royal dragon and more like a man standing at the edge of a truth he had avoided for too long. Then Seraphine's voice came from behind them. Touching exchange. But the old laws do not pause for wounded servants and guilty princes. Lyra turned away first. The stairway ended at a black door grown into the mountain root itself. It was not built. It was born. White veins ran through the stone like frozen lightning. At its center rested an empty circular hollow shaped like a palm. Seraphine stepped forward. "The door opens only to royal fire," she said. Kale lifted his hand. Every guard lowered their head as crimson flame gathered slowly around his fingers. Too slowly. Pain flickered across his face. He hid it quickly, but Lyra saw how much effort it took to summon even that small blaze. The flame touched the door. Nothing happened. A murmur passed through the priests. Kale tried again. The red fire flared brighter, then guttered like a candle in rain. Still, the door did not move. Seraphine watched him with pity so false it felt obscene. "My prince," she said softly, "perhaps your blood is tired." Kyle went utterly still. The insult was treason dressed as concern. The court behind them froze. Lyra felt something rise in her chest. Not power, not magic. Anger, clean and sharp. For all his failures tonight, Kale had been carrying something no ruler could admit. A dying bloodline, a weakening bond, a court circling like carrion birds while waiting for him to fall. And Seraphine knew. She had known long before tonight. Lyra stepped toward the door. Kale grabbed her arm. "Do not." She looked down at his hand, then up at him. "I am tired of being the safest person in the room to blame." His grip loosened. Lyra placed her burned palm into the hollow. The mountain inhaled. The door opened. Not with a creak. Not with force. It dissolved into white mist. Beyond it lay a cavern so vast the lantern light could not reach its ceiling. Roots of crystal hung like frozen rain. A lake of still black water surrounded a stone island at the center. And there, beneath the skeleton of a dragon larger than the palace itself, rested an egg the color of moonlit bone. The forbidden white dragon egg. Every torch died again. But Lyra could see. The egg pulsed with the same light beneath her skin. Then a crack appeared across its shell. Seraphine screamed, "Caesar!" Temple guards rushed forward. Kyle moved at the same time. For one wild second, Lyra thought he had chosen to protect her. But the cavern floor split between them. White fire erupted upward. The guards were thrown back. The lake rose into the air in thousands of glittering droplets. The dragon skeleton above the egg began to glow. Lyra stumbled onto the stone bridge leading toward the island. Every step burned. Every breath dragged memories from a life she had never lived. A woman singing in an extinct tongue. A white dragon lowering its head before a child. A crown placed not upon a prince, but into the hands of a girl with blood on her wrists. Behind her, Kale shouted her name. Not servant. Not human. Lyra. She reached the egg as the final crack split open. The shell broke. White light flooded the cavern, and from within the forbidden egg, a dragon opened its eyes. Not red, not gold, not black, silver white. Ancien. Awake. The hatchling was no larger than a hunting hound, trembling beneath wet wings that shimmered like pearl. But power rolled from it in waves so vast, every dragon-blooded noble collapsed to their knees. All except Lyra. The baby dragon lifted its head. It looked past Kale, past Seraphine, past the priests, nobles, soldiers, and every bloodline that had ruled Verithel for centuries. Then it crawled straight into Lyra's arms. The cavern went silent. The hatchling pressed its forehead against her chest, and the royal dragon crest on Prince Kael's throat went dark. No one breathed. The silence inside the white vault became something living, something heavy enough to crush bone. Lyra stood frozen on the stone island with the newborn dragon trembling against her chest, its silver-white scales glowing softly beneath the cavern darkness. Its heartbeat pulsed against her palms, small, frightened, impossibly warm, and every royal dragon above the mountain screamed. The sound thundered through the kingdom, like the beginning of war. Across the Black Lake, nobles collapsed to their knees in terror. Priests clutched their sacred symbols. Even the royal guards struggled to remain standing beneath the pressure rolling through the cavern. Only Kyle remained upright. Barely. The dragon mark at his throat had gone completely dark. No flame. No ember. Nothing. Lyra saw the horror in the court before she fully understood it herself. The royal bond had rejected him. Not weakened. Rejected. Seraphine understood first. Of course she did. The high priestess staggered backward as though struck. No. Her voice echoed sharply across the cavern. Impossible. The hatchling lifted its head from Lyra's chest. Tiny silver eyes turned toward the prince. Then the dragon hissed. Not fearfully. Judgmentally. Ancient instinct rippled through the white vault. Kale's royal guards immediately drew their weapons, but none dared approach the island itself, because the skeleton surrounding the egg had awakened. The massive remains of the ancient white dragon above them now glowed with pale fire, threading through every enormous rib bone. The skull tilted downward slightly, empty eye sockets fixed upon the royal court. Watching, waiting, judging. Lyra's pulse hammered painfully. She should have been terrified. Instead, all she could feel was the hatchling clinging tighter to her. It was afraid. That realization shattered something inside her. This creature, this forbidden beast powerful enough to terrify kingdoms, was newly born and frightened in a room full of people already deciding whether it deserved to die. Just like her, Seraphine recovered first. "Kill it," she whispered. No one moved. The priestess raised her voice. "Kill it now." Kyle's gaze snapped toward her. "The hatchling has severed the royal flame," Seraphine hissed. "Can you not feel it? The white dragon has judged House Draven unworthy." Shock rippled through the nobles. Several immediately lowered their eyes from Kyle. That hurt more than any accusation. In Verithel, dragons were not pets. They were divine proof. A ruler rejected by dragonfire did not remain ruler for long. Kale stepped forward slowly onto the narrow bridge leading toward Lyra. Temple guards instantly blocked his path. Seraphine's expression sharpened. "Do not approach it." Kale's voice became dangerously quiet. "Move. You are compromised." The prince looked at the guards standing between him and the island. Every single one lowered their gaze. Not loyalty. Fear. Lyra saw it clearly now. The court had already begun calculating survival. If Kale lost the dragons, the throne would bleed, and weak kings did not survive mountain kingdoms. Seraphine turned toward the nobles. "Witness what stands before us. The ancient white flame has returned after centuries of silence. The old laws are awakening. The old laws are dead," Kale growled. The cavern shook. Not from him, from the hatchling. The tiny dragon pressed closer against Lyra, and suddenly every crystal root along the cavern ceiling burst into white light. Ancient symbols ignited across the stone floor, spreading outward like rivers of moonfire. The lake beneath the bridge began to boil. A whisper echoed through the chamber, not spoken aloud. "Felt. Blood remembers." Lyra nearly dropped to her knees. Images flooded her mind violently. Women crowned in silver flame. White dragons circling frozen mountains. Kings kneeling before queens whose blood carried celestial fire. Then, red dragons. Burning temples. White wings falling from the sky. And a voice. A woman's voice. "Hide the last egg, before the Fire Kings destroy her too." Lyra gasped sharply. The hatchling whimpered. Kyle noticed immediately. What is happening to her? Seraphine's face had gone pale beneath the torchlight. The blood memory. The old Lord Valor whispered in horror. "The celestial inheritance." Kyle looked toward him sharply. "Speak clearly." The old noble swallowed hard. White dragons did not bond through conquest like red dragons. They chose through blood resonance. Lyra's chest tightened. Valor continued shakily. Only descendants of the old celestial queens could awaken them. The cavern turned silent again. Every gaze slowly shifted toward Lyra. "Humain. Servant." Oathbound. Impossible. Seraphine's expression hardened instantly. Lies. But her voice carried fear now. Real fear. The old lord looked at the hatchling curled against Lyra. If the dragon chose her, then she carries celestial blood, another noble whispered. No, Seraphine snapped. The celestial line was exterminated. The hatchling suddenly growled. The sound should not have been dangerous coming from such a small creature. Yet every torch dimmed instantly. The priest stepped back. The dragon did not like Seraphine. Interesting. Lyra carefully stroked the hatchling's neck. Its scales softened beneath her fingers. And without meaning to, she spoke aloud in a language she did not know. The words flowed from her lips like memory. Soft. Ancien. Silver light spread gently through the cavern. The hatchling relaxed immediately. Then the entire white vault bowed. Not metaphorically. The crystals bent downward. The lake lowered. Even the skeleton overhead inclined slightly toward her. The court erupted into panic. She's controlling it. Witchcraft. Kill her before the bond completes. Guards surged forward. Kyle moved faster. Dragonfire exploded from his hand. Not crimson this time, but dark red edged with black. The flames tore across the bridge between Lyra and the soldiers, forcing them backward. The effort nearly dropped him to one knee. His control was failing. Lyra saw it clearly now. Sweat lined his brow despite the cold cavern air. Black veins spread briefly beneath the skin near his throat, before disappearing again. Seraphine saw it too, and smiled. A tiny smile. Hidden. Victorious. Suddenly, everything sharpened in Lyra's mind. The prince's weakening dragon bond. The dying hatchlings. The temple's growing authority. The accusations against her. This had never begun with her. Seraphine had been preparing for Kyle's fall long before Lyra touched the egg. The human servant was simply the easiest sacrifice. The realization sent ice through her veins. Kale faced the court alone now, standing between them and the island. Sword drawn, flames flickering weakly around his hand. A prince already being abandoned by his own kingdom, and still protecting her. Why? Lyra did not understand anymore. The hatchling lifted its head suddenly. Its silver eyes locked onto Kale. Then it did something impossible. It climbed from Lyra's arms. The tiny dragon crossed the island slowly, while the entire cavern watched in terrified silence. Kale did not move. The hatchling stopped directly before him. Then it sniffed the air around the prince once. Twice. A strange sadness entered its gaze. Not hatred. Recognition. The hatchling pressed its forehead gently against Kale's hand. The dark veins beneath the prince's skin immediately vanished. Gasps exploded through the court. Kyle froze. White light pulsed between dragon and prince. For one brief heartbeat, the dead royal crest at Kale's throat reignited. Weakly, but alive, the hatchling stepped back again, then returned to Lyra. The meaning hit the court instantly. The white dragon had not rejected Kale entirely. It had judged him incomplete, and only through her could the royal bond survive. Seraphine understood the danger immediately. If the court realized Lyra could restore the prince's failing bloodline, everything the temple had built would collapse. The priestess lifted her hand sharply. Archers, hidden soldiers emerged from the shadows above the cavern walls. Temple archers. Their arrows glowed black. Dragon-killing poison. Kale turned instantly. Stand down. Seraphine's voice rang through the cavern. The celestial line nearly destroyed this kingdom once before. Kill the girl before the bond fully awakens. The first arrow flew. Kale moved without hesitation. He stepped directly in front of Lyra. The poisoned arrow buried itself deep into his shoulder. The prince staggered. The cavern erupted. Kale. Lyra caught him as more arrows rained downward. The hatchling screamed. White fire exploded across the lake. The bridge shattered beneath the force. Guards fell into the boiling water below. Priests fled, screaming, as ancient dragon bones burst into brilliant light overhead. Kale dropped heavily against Lyra, blood spreading rapidly through his black armor. The poison was working fast. Far too fast. His breathing became ragged, and for the first time since she had known him, the Dragon Prince looked afraid. Not of death, of her, of what protecting her might cost. Lyra held him tightly, while chaos consumed the white vault around them. "Why?" she whispered desperately. Kael's eyes met hers through pain and smoke. And finally, the truth cracked through his restraint. "Because the moment that dragon touched you," his voice broke roughly, "I realized the kingdom would rather burn than let you live." Another explosion shook the cavern. Seraphine screamed orders above the chaos. The hatchling curled protectively around them both now, white fire building beneath its tiny scales. Kael grabbed Lyra's wrist weakly. "You need to run. I'm not leaving you. You must." Black poison spread through the veins near his neck. The prince's voice lowered painfully. "If the court learns what you truly are..." A terrible roar interrupted him. Not from the hatchling, from above the mountain. The royal dragons. Hundreds of them, and they were descending toward the palace. The first dragon struck the mountain like falling judgment. Stone exploded above the white vault. Dust rained from the cavern ceiling as a roar powerful enough to split bone thundered through the underground lake. The temple archers lost their footing immediately, several tumbling screaming into the boiling black water below. Then came the second impact, and the third. The royal dragons had descended upon the palace, but they were not obeying commands. They were panicking. Lyra held Kael against her as tremors ripped through the island beneath them. Blood soaked through the prince's black armor, hot against her frozen hands. The poison spreading through his veins shimmered dark silver beneath his skin now, moving far too quickly toward his heart. The hatchling snarled beside them, tiny wings flaring. White fire gathered in its throat. Not ordinary flame, moonfire. The kind ancient stories claimed could burn magic itself. Across the collapsing bridge, Seraphine stared at the prince with cold fury. "You doomed us," she hissed. Kael laughed once. Weakly, blood touched the corner of his mouth. "No, priestess." His gaze sharpened despite the poison. "You did." The mountain shook again. Above them, dragon screams turned savage. Not fear. Battle. Lyra's pulse stumbled. The royal dragons were fighting each other. "No," Lord Valor whispered from the far side of the shattered bridge. The bond collapse. Kael's expression darkened instantly. The old noble was right. Without a stable royal bond guiding them, dragons became territorial, violent, uncontrollable. If the palace dragons fully lost command of their instincts, Varethel itself would burn before dawn. Seraphine understood it too, which was why she looked more desperate now than triumphant. The priestess raised both hands toward the cavern ceiling, gold symbols blazing across her skin. "By sacred flame and temple oath, I command the white beast to submit." The hatchling immediately screamed. Its tiny body convulsed. Lyra felt the magic strike through the bond connecting them. Pain ripped through her chest hard enough to force her onto one knee beside Kael. The priestess was attacking the dragon through her. "Stop," Lyra gasped. Seraphine's face twisted with effort. "It still answers temple law. While the bond remains incomplete, I can sever it." The hatchling whimpered in agony. White scales darkened near its throat. Lyra's panic exploded into fury. Without thinking, she reached toward the dragon. Enough. The word echoed strangely. Not loudly. Anciently. Every symbol in the white vault ignited. The priestess froze. Then the gold marks on Seraphine's arms began cracking apart. The high priestess screamed. Real fear this time. The temple magic around her shattered violently, sending priests stumbling backward. Black smoke erupted from the broken symbols across her skin, as though something beneath them had rotted long ago. Lyra stared at her own glowing hands in horror. She had not meant to do that. The hatchling pressed against her immediately, calming. Kael watched her carefully now. Not like a servant. Not even like a mystery. Like something dangerous enough to change kingdoms. That look should have frightened her. Instead, it hurt, because part of him still feared what she might become. Seraphine collapsed to one knee, across the broken bridge, breathing hard. Hatred burned openly in her eyes now. "You carry her blood," the priestess whispered. The cavern quieted. Even the dragons above seemed to pause. Lyra frowned. "Whose blood?" But Seraphine only stared. Lord Valor answered instead. "The last celestial queen." The title struck the white vault like thunder. Memories surged through Lyra again. A woman standing atop frozen cliffs, with silver fire in her palms. A crown forged from dragonbone. An army, kneeling beneath white wings. Then, betrayal. Red flames, devouring temples. Children screaming. A queen falling beneath black spears while protecting a single glowing egg. Lyra gasped sharply. The hatchling whimpered again. Kyle caught her shoulders before she collapsed entirely. His touch burned, not painfully, hungrily. The prince inhaled sharply the moment his skin met hers. Something passed between them. Not dragon fire. Something deeper. Ancien. Lyra felt it too. A pull low in her chest. A dangerous awareness. Kale released her immediately, as though he hated himself for noticing. But it was too late. The hatchling saw. Its silver eyes widened. Then the tiny dragon chirped softly and pressed its head against both of their hands at once. The white vault exploded with light. Every noble cried out. Kale jerked backward instantly, horror flashing across his face. "No." The word came rough and immediate. Lyra's pulse stumbled. "What?" But she already knew. Not fully. Not logically. Instinctively. The bond. Not servant and prince. Not dragon and rider. Mate. Impossible. Humans could not form dragon bonds. And yet the hatchling had just recognized one. Kale stepped away from her as if distance alone might undo what happened. The poison still spread through his veins, but something worse moved behind his eyes now. Fear. Not of her. Of destiny. Seraphine saw it instantly, and smiled. Slowly. Cruelly. "There it is," the priestess whispered. "The prophecy." Kale's head snapped toward her. "Be silent." But Seraphine was already rising. Blood trickled from cracked temple markings across her arms. Yet triumph burned brighter than pain in her gaze now. "You thought the old prophecy dead," she said softly. "You buried the celestial records beneath the Ember Temple. You slaughtered every remaining bloodline tied to the white flame. And still..." She looked directly at Lyra. She returned. Lyra felt sick. Kale's expression became murderous. "One more word. The Dragon Prince shall kneel before the Celestial Queen," Seraphine recited coldly, "and through their union the Fire Throne shall either be reborn." Her smile deepened slightly, or destroyed forever. The cavern turned deadly quiet. Kale's silence confirmed everything. He knew the prophecy. He had always known. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. "You knew?" The prince did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Pain cracked through her chest harder than the magic. Not because of fate. Because he had hidden it. All those years. All those careful distances. All those moments he almost softened before retreating again. He had known something about her long before tonight. Kyle finally spoke. "I did not know it was you. But you suspected?" His silence hurt more than lies. The hatchling whimpered between them. Above the cavern, another massive explosion shook the palace. Then came screams. Human screams. The dragons had reached the city. Lord Valor stumbled toward the prince desperately. "Your Highness, if the royal dragons are no longer controlled..." "I know." Kyle turned sharply toward Lyra. His face had gone pale beneath the poison spreading through his veins, but command still radiated from him like heat before wildfire. "You need to leave the mountain." Lyra stared at him. "The city is burning, because the dragons are unraveling. Then help them." "I cannot." The words landed like a blade. Kale looked away for the first time, and Lyra finally saw the full truth. His dragon bond was dying, not weakening, dying. The prince's voice dropped low. "The royal line has been failing for years. Every generation weaker than the last. The dragons know it. The temple knows it. The border lords smell it already. Seraphine laughed bitterly. Because your bloodline stole a throne never meant for red fire. Kyle ignored her. His eyes remained fixed on Lyra now. The white dragon choosing you changes everything. Then why do you look terrified? That finally cracked something in him. Kyle stepped closer again, voice rough with exhaustion and anger. Because every kingdom beyond these mountains will come for you now. His gaze burned into hers. Because celestial queens are not crowned, Lyra. They are hunted. The hatchling hissed suddenly. Its tiny body stiffened. Then every crystal in the white vault dimmed. A new sound echoed through the cavern. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Metal scraping stone. The remaining guards backed away immediately. Even Seraphine's expression faltered. Something else was descending into the white vault. Something ancient. The shadows near the broken entrance shifted. Then, a massive dragon emerged from the darkness. Black scales. Burning red eyes. A body scarred by countless wars. Kael's royal dragon. Veyrath. The enormous beast entered the cavern limping heavily, smoke rolling from its jaws. One side of its neck bled from deep claw wounds. The dragon's pupils were blown wide with feral instinct, barely restrained beneath the collapsing bond. The guards panicked immediately. Protect the prince. Fall back. But Veyrath ignored everyone except Kyle. The dragon lowered its enormous head toward him and growled. Not affection. Accusation. Kyle stood perfectly still. Pain flickered briefly across his face. The bond between them was breaking apart. Lyra felt it instinctively now. The dragon blamed him. The hatchling stepped protectively in front of Lyra and hissed at the massive black dragon. Veyrath's eyes immediately snapped toward the white hatchling. The cavern froze. Then the ancient war instinct awakened. Black dragon. White dragon. Old blood enemies. Veyrath roared. The hatchling answered with white fire. The explosion shattered half the cavern wall. Stone collapsed into the lake below. Nobles screamed. Kale turned instantly toward Lyra. Run, tu latte. The ceiling above them cracked open. Moonlight poured into the white vault for the first time in centuries. And descending through that silver light came dozens of armored riders mounted on enormous war dragons, bearing the banners of the northern kingdoms. Invaders. The border lords had come, and they had arrived far faster than anyone should have known possible. Seraphine slowly smiled. Kyle saw it. So did Lyra. The priestess had betrayed the kingdom. The northern dragons descended through the shattered ceiling like executioners from an ancient nightmare. Moonlight poured behind them in violent silver beams as enormous wings blotted out the stars above the mountain. Iron armor gleamed across scaled bodies scarred by frost wars, and beneath the riders' cloaks burned the crest every child in Varethel feared. The Iron Fang Confederacy. The Northern Packs. Enemies of House Draven for over 2 centuries. Lyra's stomach dropped. No border army should have reached the capital this quickly. Not unless someone inside the palace had opened the gates long before tonight. KL understood instantly. His gaze snapped toward Seraphine. You opened the mountain passes. The High Priestess did not deny it. The cavern winds whipped crimson robes around her, as northern dragons circled above the shattered vault ceiling. Firelight flickered across her face, revealing something colder than ambition. Conviction. You were already losing the throne, she said quietly. I merely chose which fire would survive the ashes. The betrayal hit the court harder than the invasion itself. Several nobles recoiled in horror. Others looked away too quickly. Complicit. Kyle noticed every one of them. Of course he did. The prince had spent his life surrounded by predators wearing silk. Veyrath roared again, black smoke pouring from between his teeth as the wounded dragon positioned himself protectively before KL. But the great beast trembled now. Blood pooled beneath one claw. His connection to the prince frayed visibly with every breath. The hatchling hissed at the invaders overhead. Tiny, furious, completely unafraid. And somehow that frightened Lyra more than the war dragon circling above. A rider descended from the largest northern dragon and landed heavily on the fractured bridge between the island and the court. Lord Magnus Varric, the Beast King of the Northern Pacts. He was enormous, even for dragon blood, broad-shouldered beneath white wolf pelts lined with steel. One side of his face had been destroyed long ago by dragon fire, leaving pale scars clawing down his throat beneath a heavy iron collar. The court shrank from him instinctively, not because he was ugly, because he looked like a man who had survived too many executions to fear another. Magnus removed his gauntlets slowly. His gaze settled first on Cal, then on Lyra, then on the white hatchling curled protectively beside her. For the first time since entering the vault, the Beast King looked genuinely stunned. "No," he murmured. The hatchling stared back at him calmly. Then it did something strange. It lowered its head slightly. Not submission. Recognition. Magnus went pale beneath his scars. Seraphine stepped toward him immediately. "You see now why the old bloodline cannot be allowed to rise again." Kael's voice became deathly quiet. "You brought northern wolves into my kingdom for this?" "I brought survivors," Seraphine corrected. "Before your throne drags us all into extinction." Kael's eyes darkened. "You think they came to save Varethel?" "No," Magnus answered before Seraphine could. "I came because your dragon started screaming 3 nights ago." The cavern quieted. Magnus looked toward Lyra again. Specifically, toward her wrists, toward the pale glow beneath her skin, then toward the hatchling. Something ancient moved behind the Beast King's expression. Fear. Not political fear. Personal fear. "You should have killed the egg centuries ago," he said softly. The hatchling snarled. Every northern dragon above the vault immediately recoiled. Lyra felt it too now. The hatchling was stronger than it appeared. Much stronger. Not in size. In authority. Kael stepped forward despite the poison still spreading through his veins. "This is still my kingdom." Magnus met his gaze evenly. "For tonight." Tension snapped across the white vault, like stretched wire. Every dragon rider reached for weapons. Royal guards tightened formation around the prince. Temple priests backed slowly away from everyone. And in the center of it all stood Lyra, clutching a truth capable of destroying kingdoms. She suddenly understood why the celestial queens vanished. Not because they were weak, because everyone feared what happened when dragons chose someone the throne could not control. Seraphine pointed toward Lyra sharply. "Take the girl." Everything happened at once. Northern riders surged forward. Veyrath roared and unleashed black dragon fire across the broken bridge, forcing half the invaders backward. Temple archers fired poisoned bolts toward the island. Kael drew his sword in a burst of dark flame, and Magnus shouted, "Stop!" The command shook the cavern. Not magically, authoritatively. Every northern rider froze instantly. Magnus stared directly at Seraphine. "I agreed to secure the White Vault." His scarred voice dropped lower. "Not slaughter a hatchling." The priestess's mask cracked slightly. "The celestial beast must die before it matures. And if killing it destroys the mountain?" Seraphine hesitated. Only briefly. But Kael noticed. "So that is the truth," the prince said coldly. Lyra's pulse quickened. Seraphine turned sharply toward him. "The white flame destabilizes dragonfire itself. If the hatchling fully bonds, every royal dragon south of the Frostfang cliffs could collapse into madness." Lord Valor looked horrified. "Why would the old queens create such creatures?" "They didn't," Seraphine snapped. "The white dragons were created to judge corrupted rulers. They answer balance, not kingdoms." Magnus folded his arms slowly. "And House Draven failed the judgment." Kael did not deny it. That frightened Lyra most of all. The prince's silence confirmed what everyone secretly feared. The dragons themselves had begun abandoning the throne. The hatchling suddenly whimpered. Lyra immediately looked down. Its scales flickered weakly now. The silver light dimmed beneath its skin. Fear tightened around her chest. "What's wrong?" The hatchling pressed closer against her. Then she felt it. Cold. Not physical cold. Separation. The creature was struggling to maintain its strength inside the vault. It needed something. Or someone. The memories surged again without warning. A white dragon curled around a queen beneath moonlight. A bond forged through shared flame. Not ownership. Trust. Lyra gasped softly. The hatchling lifted its head toward her. Understanding passed between them instantly. Kael saw it. His face hardened. No. Lyra looked at him. It's weakening. You do not know what the bond will do to you. Neither do you. The prince stepped toward her despite the chaos around them. Lyra, listen carefully to me. Not servant, not human. Lyra. His voice carried something dangerous now. Emotion. Raw and uncontrolled beneath the prince's restraint. If you complete the bond before understanding it, the white flame could consume you entirely. Seraphine laughed sharply. Or reveal what she truly is. Kael ignored her. His eyes never left Lyra's. Do not do this because you pity it. The hatchling whimpered again. Lyra touched its trembling scales carefully. It's alone. Kael's expression cracked for the briefest moment. Because he understood loneliness too well. That was the worst part. He always understood. He simply feared the cost of caring more than the pain of distance. Above them, northern dragons continued circling the open vault while battle erupted throughout the palace. Smoke poured down through the shattered ceiling now. Bells rang wildly across the capital. The kingdom was collapsing. And still every eye in the cavern remained fixed on the girl holding the forbidden dragon. Seraphine moved first. The priestess raised both hands toward the ceiling. Golden fire erupted around her in a violent spiral as temple symbols burned across the stone floor. I will not watch another celestial queen rise. The white vault screamed. Ancient symbols cracked apart beneath Seraphine's magic. The black lake surged violently upward. Even the dragon skeleton overhead trembled beneath the force gathering around the high priestess. Magnus cursed sharply. She's breaking the vault. Kael turned instantly. Stop her. Too late. Seraphine slammed both hands into the stone bridge. The entire cavern ruptured. The island beneath Lyra split apart. She cried out as the ground collapsed beneath her feet. The hatchling shrieked. White fire exploded upward while ancient dragon bones shattered from the ceiling. Kael moved without hesitation, ignoring poison, ignoring war, ignoring the throne itself. He leapt across the collapsing stone toward her. Their hands caught. For one impossible heartbeat, Lyra hung suspended above the boiling black lake with Kael gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise. The hatchling clung desperately to her chest. Below them, the dark water churned violently around broken dragon bones, sharp enough to impale anyone who fell. Kael strained against the collapsing stone beneath him. The poison spreading through his body had weakened him badly. Lyra saw it in the trembling muscles of his arm. Saw the pain carved into his face. He was losing strength, and still he refused to let her go. Above them, Seraphine watched coldly. Choose, Prince. Kael looked up murderously. The priestess smiled faintly. Save the throne, or save her. The bridge cracked again. More stone collapsed into darkness. Lyra's fingers slipped slightly in Kael's grip. The prince tightened instantly. For the first time since she had met him, true fear filled his eyes. Not fear for himself, for her. And suddenly Lyra understood something devastating. Kael had never kept distance because he felt nothing. He kept distance because he already cared too much. The realization nearly broke her. Kael, the hatchling screamed. White fire burst from its body in a blinding wave. Every dragon in the sky answered instantly. Then the bond awakened. Silver light exploded across Lyra's skin. Ancient symbols ignited along her arms and throat like living moonfire. The cavern froze. The dragons froze. Even Seraphine stopped breathing, because the glowing mark now burning over Lyra's heart was not merely celestial. It was royal, the lost crest of the first dragon queens. And the moment Kael saw it, he understood exactly who she was. The world stopped, not metaphorically, truly. The collapsing stones hung suspended in midair. Water droplets froze above the black lake like scattered diamonds beneath moonlight. Even dragonfire paused along the shattered edges of the vault, trapped motionless inside silver light flooding from Lyra's body. No one moved. No one could. The white flame had seized the mountain itself. Lyra felt Cale's hand locked around her wrist, felt the violent pounding of his pulse through his skin, felt the hatchling pressed against her chest, trembling with ancient power. And beneath the blazing mark over her heart, something awakened. Not magic. Memory. A throne room drowned in silver fire. A woman kneeling before a dying dragon king. Blood soaking white stone. A newborn child, hidden inside a servant's cloak, while soldiers butchered celestial bloodlines through palace halls. "Run," the queen had whispered. "Hide her where red fire will never look." The memory shattered through Lyra so violently she gasped aloud. Suddenly she understood. Not everything. Enough. Enough to know her entire life had been built atop a lie. She had never been abandoned because she was unwanted. She had been hidden, protected, erased. The glowing crest across her chest pulsed brighter. Cale stared at it like a man watching prophecy tear open in front of him. "The Queen's crest," Lord Valor whispered in horror. Magnus Varric slowly removed the iron gauntlet covering his scarred hand. Then, to the shock of every northern rider in the cavern, the Beast King lowered himself onto one knee. Not before Cale. Before Lyra. The movement shattered the paralysis gripping the court. Chaos exploded, instantly. No, it cannot be. She carries the first crown. The celestial heir lives. Several nobles immediately dropped to their knees. Others backed away in terror. Temple priests drew blades. Seraphine's face had gone white with fury. And Kyle still held Lyra suspended above the abyss like he could not decide whether to save her or surrender to what she represented. The mountain trembled again. This time, not from battle. From dragons. Hundreds of them. Every royal dragon circling Verithel had turned toward the white vault. Toward her. Lyra felt it suddenly. Their emotions. Fear. Pain. Confusion. They were suffering. The broken royal bond had thrown the entire kingdom into chaos. The hatchling whimpered softly against her chest. Then Lyra understood what the white flame truly was. Not domination. Harmony. The celestial queens had never ruled dragons through force. They listened to them. The realization struck with painful clarity. House Draven's line had weakened because they treated dragons like symbols of conquest instead of living creatures bound by ancient trust. Cale saw understanding cross her face. His grip tightened instinctively. Lyra. The way he said her name nearly undid her. No prince. No ruler. Just a man standing at the edge of losing everything. The collapsing bridge groaned violently beneath him. Time resumed all at once. Stone shattered. The black lake surged upward. Kyle lost his footing, and both of them fell. Gasps erupted throughout the vault, but before terror could fully seize her, white wings exploded open around Lyra. Not hers. The hatchlings. Silver fire burst outward in a blinding storm, halting their fall just above the boiling water. The tiny dragon should not have possessed enough strength for such power. Yet the white flame answered desperation. Cale crashed hard beside her onto a narrow fragment of broken stone rising from the lake. Lyra landed beside him moments later, shaken and breathless, while white fire spiraled protectively around them both. Above, the remaining bridge finally collapsed entirely. The court stood stranded on the far side of the cavern, separated. Kyle pushed himself upright first, despite the poison ravaging his body. Blood dripped from his shoulder, wound into the black water below. The veins near his throat had darkened nearly to black now. Lyra's fear sharpened instantly. The poison. Cale ignored it. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing crest over her heart. "When were you born?" The question startled her. "What? When?" Lyra frowned through the chaos around them. "During winter solstice." Kyle closed his eyes briefly. Pain flashed across his face. "The same night the celestial palace burned," he whispered. Lyra stared at him. "You knew?" Cale laughed once bitterly. "I knew rumors." His jaw tightened. An infant disappeared before the slaughter ended. The Ember Temple spent 20 years hunting ghosts afterward. Seraphine screamed from across the broken cavern. Do not listen to him. Kyle ignored her completely. His gaze burned into Lyra now with terrifying intensity. My father found evidence years ago that one celestial heir survived the purge. The mountain shook again overhead. Northern dragons clashed with royal beasts above the capital, their roars echoing through the vault like thunder. KL stepped closer, despite the unstable stone beneath them. I destroyed the records. Lyra's breath caught. What? I burned every document tying the missing heir to the palace. The confession stunned her more than the revelation itself. Why? KL's expression turned cold with old fury. Because children should not be hunted for bloodlines. The words hit harder than she expected. Suddenly, countless moments across 7 years rearranged themselves inside her mind. The prince assigning her quarters closer to the royal wing. For convenience. His fury whenever nobles insulted human servants. The hidden guards following her through market streets without her knowledge. The winter he personally banned temple priests from entering the servant district. Kale had been protecting her long before tonight. Not because he knew for certain, because he feared the possibility. Lyra's chest ached painfully. Then why let them chain me? The question finally cut through his armor. Real guilt flickered across his face. Because if I defended you publicly without proof, the council would have moved against you sooner. That isn't an answer. No, he said roughly. It isn't. The honesty hurt worse. Above them, Seraphine raised a black ceremonial blade toward the ceiling. Archers, kill the hatchling now. Northern riders hesitated. Temple archers did not. Poisoned arrows rained downward toward the isolated stone. Kale moved instantly, dragging Lyra against him as dark dragonfire burst around his arm in a protective shield. The effort nearly killed him. The flames flickered violently, then died. Kale dropped hard to one knee. The poison had reached his heart. Lyra caught him before he collapsed into the lake. Kyle. The prince's breathing became ragged. Black veins spread beneath his skin now openly. The hatchling growled low beside them, distressed. Seraphine saw weakness immediately. Look at your prince, the priestess shouted toward the court. The celestial curse devours him already. Several frightened nobles backed farther away from Kale. Cowards. Lyra felt fury burn through her chest. Not wild rage. Something colder, cleaner. These people had watched Kyle bleed for a kingdom already preparing to abandon him, and somehow he still stood between them and destruction. Magnus Varick's voice cut sharply across the cavern. Enough. The Beast King turned toward Seraphine with open disgust now. You promised stability. Seraphine's expression hardened. I promised survival. You promised me the white flame was dormant. It was. Her eyes snapped toward Lyra, until she touched the egg. The hatchling hissed again. Magnus looked between Lyra and Kale carefully, then toward the poison consuming the prince. Finally, realization settled over the Beast King's scarred face. The bond stabilized him. Kale's jaw tightened instantly. Lyra frowned. What? Magnus pointed toward Kale's throat. When the hatchling touched him earlier, his dragon mark reignited. The cavern quieted. The Beast King looked directly at Lyra now. The white flame isn't killing the prince. His voice darkened. It's the only thing keeping him alive. Seraphine's face changed. For the first time since entering the vault, the high priestess looked afraid. Real fear. Because if Lyra could restore the failing royal bond, the throne would no longer need the Ember Temple. Kale tried to stand again. Failed. The poison dragged another rough breath from him. Lyra held him tighter instinctively, and suddenly the hatchling pressed its forehead against both of them. Silver fire spiraled upward. The bond pulsed. Kyle inhaled. Sharply. The black veins beneath his skin stopped spreading. Only stopped. Not healed. The hatchling whimpered weakly. It could slow the poison, but not remove it. Not yet. Lyra understood immediately. The bond was incomplete. Seraphine understood too, which was why terror suddenly sharpened into desperation across her face. Do not let them finish the bond. The priestess thrust her blade downward into the ancient stone. Temple symbols across the vault exploded open. The black lake beneath Lyra and Kale began to rise. Not naturally. Something moved inside it. Something enormous. Ancient chains rattled deep below the water. Lord Vaylor went pale. No. Magnus cursed violently beneath his breath. Kael's eyes darkened with horror. Lyra felt the hatchling freeze against her chest. Then, the lake erupted. A colossal shape burst upward from the darkness beneath them. Black scales, broken chains, eyes burning silver-white beneath centuries of rage. An ancient dragon larger than the palace itself rose screaming from beneath the vault, the last imprisoned celestial beast, and it was staring directly at Lyra. The ancient dragon rose from the black lake, like the wrath of a forgotten god. Water crashed violently from enormous white-black scales, scarred by centuries of imprisonment. Broken chains dragged from its throat and wings, each link larger than a human body, etched with temple runes glowing crimson beneath the moonlight pouring through the shattered vault ceiling. The cavern shook beneath its roar. Not ordinary sound. Judgment. The force alone sent nobles collapsing across the far ledge. Temple priests screamed prayers. Several northern dragons circling above the mountain immediately fled into the storm-dark sky. Even Veyrath recoiled. Kael's royal dragon lowered his massive head instinctively before the beast emerging from the lake. Not submission. Recognition. The hatchling pressed against Lyra's chest and trembled violently. The enormous dragon's silver eyes locked onto her, then onto the glowing crest over her heart. The beast froze. A terrible silence followed. Seraphine staggered backward in visible panic. No, the guardian should still be sleeping. Guardian. The word echoed through Lyra's mind strangely. Note. Monster. Not weapon. Guardian. The enormous dragon slowly climbed onto the broken remains of the island, claws crushing ancient stone like brittle ice. Moonlight revealed scars, covering nearly half its body, deep wounds carved by old dragon fire and temple steel. Someone had tortured this creature. For centuries. The dragon lowered its colossal head toward Lyra. Every soldier in the vault raised weapons immediately. Kael forced himself upright, despite the poison tearing through him. No one attacks. His voice cracked with exhaustion. But command still thundered beneath it. Seraphine ignored him. Kill it now. Temple archers loosed arrows. The ancient dragon moved faster than thought. White fire exploded through the cavern. Not hot. Cold. Beautiful. Terrifying. The arrows dissolved into silver ash before touching its scales. Then the dragon turned its gaze toward the archers. One look. That was all. Every bow in the vault shattered instantly. The archers screamed as moonfire spread across their weapons, climbing like frost through wood and iron. Not burning them. Judging them. Lyra felt the hatchling nuzzle closer against her. The ancient dragon lowered its massive head until one silver eye filled her entire vision. Inside that eye, she saw memory. A queen laughing beneath snowfall. Dragons sleeping around crystal towers. Children riding white hatchlings through frozen skies. Then betrayal again. Red fire consuming celestial temples. Priests driving black spears through dragon wings. The ancient beast chained beneath the mountain, while hatchlings screamed in slaughter pits above. Lyra gasped sharply. Tears burned her eyes before she realized she was crying. The dragon had shown her everything. Not words. Truth. The celestial dragons had not vanished naturally. They had been exterminated. Kael saw her expression immediately. What did it show you? Lyra looked at him with shattered understanding. The temple killed them. The cavern went still. Seraphine's face twisted. Lies. But Lord Vaylor lowered his gaze in shame, and that silence confirmed enough. Kael turned slowly toward the priestess. You knew. Seraphine lifted her chin. The celestial beasts threatened the balance. You slaughtered them. We preserved the kingdom. The high priestess stepped forward, gold symbols blazing violently across her skin now. The white dragons turned queens into gods. Kingdoms collapsed beneath their judgment. Entire bloodlines vanished because celestial rulers answered only dragon law. The ancient beast growled low. The sound cracked half the remaining pillars in the vault. Seraphine pointed toward Lyra furiously. Look at her. The dragons already kneel. The nobles already fear her more than their prince. Kael's voice became lethally quiet. And that frightens you. The priestess smiled bitterly. It should frighten everyone. For one painful moment, silence spread again. Because beneath Seraphine's cruelty, there was truth. Lyra could feel it now. The white flame did not simply crown rulers. It exposed them. No lie survived it. No corruption hid from it. Kingdoms built on fear would burn beneath its judgment. That was why the celestial queens were feared. Not because they were cruel, because they could not be controlled. The ancient dragon shifted closer to Lyra. Then, impossibly gently, it lowered its head beneath her hand. The entire vault inhaled sharply. Lyra's trembling fingers touched cool silver scales. The beast closed its eyes. Relief. The emotion hit her so suddenly she nearly broke apart beneath it. This creature had been alone for centuries, chained beneath stone, listening to the bloodline it once protected slowly erase its existence from history. And still, it had not attacked her. The hatchling chirped softly. The ancient dragon opened its eyes again and looked toward Kael. Lum, carefully, judging. Kael stood motionless despite the poison weakening him. The dragon's gaze drifted toward the black veins spreading across his throat. Then toward Seraphine. The beast growled. This time, unmistakably, Hatred. The high priestess immediately stepped backward. Protect the temple. Northern riders and royal guards alike hesitated. No one wanted to stand between the ancient dragon and its rage. Seraphine realized it instantly. Her expression sharpened into desperation. Do you fools not understand? She shouted toward the court. The white flame destroys kingdoms. The celestial queens drowned empires in dragon wars. Magnus Varick's scarred gaze narrowed. And yet your temple chained a living creature beneath the mountain for generations. Seraphine spun toward him furiously. You northern wolves swore alliance. I swore to prevent another war. Magnus looked toward Lyra thoughtfully. Not murder a hatchling in a hidden air. The political shift struck the cavern like thunder. Seraphine lost color instantly. Because the northern king had just publicly withdrawn support. Kael saw it too, and despite the poison ravaging him, something dangerous flickered behind his eyes again. Hope, the high priestess noticed, which was why she made her final mistake. Seraphine lifted both hands toward the shattered ceiling and screamed ancient words into the storm above. The mountain answered, not willingly, violently. The ember temple symbols carved throughout the white vault, ignited blood red. Ancient chains hidden inside the cavern walls burst free. Massive iron hooks erupted from the stone around the ancient dragon. The beast roared in fury. Lyra felt sudden terror through their connection. The chains were designed specifically for celestial dragons. Seraphine had prepared this long ago. The hooks slammed toward the dragon's wings. Kael shouted instantly, Lyra! She moved without thinking. White fire exploded from her body. Not wild this time. Controlled. The glowing crest over her heart blazed silver across the vault as ancient instinct awakened fully beneath her skin. The chains froze midair. Every eye widened in horror. Lyra stood between the dragon and the temple magic, with moonfire spiraling around her like living wings. The hatchling screamed proudly, and behind her, the enormous celestial dragon bowed, not in surrender. Recognition. The white vault erupted into panic. She commanded it. The dragon bowed. The queen's blood is awake. Several nobles immediately dropped fully to their knees. Others fled toward the exits. Temple priests backed away from Lyra, like she carried death itself. Kael stared at her openly now. No restraint left. No denial. Only awe and fear, and something far more dangerous burning beneath both. Seraphine looked horrified. Impossible. Lyra slowly turned toward the priestess. The moonfire around her illuminated the entire vault in silver light. Her torn servant dress fluttered around her ankles, while glowing symbols spread across her skin, like ancient royal armor awakening beneath flesh. For the first time in her life, no one looked through her. No one looked down on her. And somehow that hurt, almost as much as the years they had. Lyra's voice echoed strangely now. Soft. Ancien, you chained them beneath their own mountain. Seraphine recovered enough to sneer. And I would do it again. The ancient dragon snarled. The cavern shook violently. Kael stepped forward instantly despite his weakness. Lyra. She looked toward him. The prince's face had gone pale, from poison and exhaustion, yet his eyes remained fixed entirely on her. Not the power. Here, do not let rage decide this, he said quietly. The words pierced deeper than they should have. Because after everything, the chains, the silence, the suspicion, he still feared what vengeance might turn her into. Lyra looked at Seraphine, then at the terrified nobles, then at the dragon still bowing behind her despite centuries of suffering. The old queens would have burned the court. The realization arrived cold and sharp. She could feel the possibility inside the white flame. Judgment, destruction, absolute power. And for one terrible heartbeat, part of her wanted it. The hatchling nudged her trembling hand. Small, warm, trusting. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, the moonfire softened. The chains surrounding the ancient dragon dissolved into silver ash. Gasps spread instantly across the vault. The great beast slowly lifted its head again. Free. For the first time in centuries, Seraphine stared in disbelief. You spared us? Lyra's gaze hardened. No. Her voice echoed across the cavern. I spared the kingdom. The distinction terrified everyone, especially Kael. Because in that moment, the Dragon Prince realized something devastating. The throne no longer held the true power in Varethel. She did, and if she chose, every dragon in the mountain would answer her call. Above the shattered ceiling, thunder rolled across the sky. Then, every dragon in the capital suddenly roared together, not in rage, in recognition. The ancient celestial dragon lifted its massive head toward the storm and answered with a roar, so powerful the entire kingdom heard it. The call of the white flame had returned, and Varethel would never be the same again. The roar spread across Varethel, like the sound of history waking from the dead. From the shattered white vault beneath the mountain to the outermost villages buried beneath winter forests, every dragon lifted its head toward the storm-dark sky. Then they answered, one after another. Royal dragons, northern war dragons, old wounded beasts, sleeping beneath cliffside towers, even hatchlings, hidden deep within palace nests. Their voices merged into something vast and ancient enough to shake the capital itself. Not war, recognition. The white flame had returned, and the kingdom was terrified. Inside the white vault, no one dared move. Moonlight poured through the broken ceiling in silver rivers, illuminating Lyra, where she stood between the freed celestial dragon and the fractured royal court. The glowing crest over her heart pulsed steadily now, no longer violent or unstable. Awakened, the hatchling curled around her shoulders protectively, like living moonlight, and before her, nobles knelt without being commanded. Not all of them. Some still stared with fear, others with hatred, a few with naked ambition already calculating how to survive whatever came next. Lyra saw all of it now. The white flame sharpened instinct strangely. She could almost feel the shifting loyalties in the room. Who feared her? Who wanted to use her? Who would betray her the first chance they could? And through it all, Kael watched her silently. The poison continued, darkening the veins beneath his throat, but he remained standing through sheer will alone. His black armor was stained with blood and ash. One shoulder hung slightly lower, where the poisoned arrow remained lodged beneath bone. Yet none of the nobles looked at him anymore. That hurt him. She saw it. Not pride wounded. Something deeper. Loneliness. The terrible isolation of realizing the kingdom you bled for would abandon you. The instant fear outweighed loyalty. Magnus Varric broke the silence first. The Beast King slowly rose from one knee. Scarred face unreadable beneath shifting torchlight. What happens now? The question settled heavily over the vault. No one answered. Because no one knew. The ancient celestial dragon lowered itself behind Lyra. Massive wings, folding carefully, despite its enormous size. Even wounded by centuries of imprisonment, the beast radiated enough power to make every dragon rider in the cavern visibly uneasy. Seraphine recovered next. Hatred sharpened her expression into something almost desperate now. There can be no peace while the white flame lives. Kale's voice turned lethal instantly. Careful. The priestess ignored him. She has already destabilized the dragons. Your royal bond is collapsing. The city burns above us while beasts answer her instead of the throne. Lyra looked toward the shattered ceiling. Smoke drifted through the opening from battles still raging across the capital. She could hear distant screams, crashing stone, dragon fire. The kingdom truly was falling apart. But not because of her, because the truth had finally surfaced. Kale stepped beside her now despite the whispers immediately spreading through the court. Not behind her, beside her. A dangerous choice. Lyra felt the tension shift instantly. The prince's voice echoed coldly through the vault. The city burns because the Ember Temple betrayed the crown. Seraphine laughed sharply. The crown betrayed itself long before tonight. Kyle's hand moved toward his sword. Magnus interrupted before violence erupted again. Enough. The Beast King looked between them carefully. If we continue this argument, there will be no kingdom left by sunrise. He was right. Everyone knew it. Above them, another dragon screamed, closer this time. Then came the sound of collapsing towers. Lord Valor turned pale. The rookery. Kale closed his eyes briefly. The Royal Dragon Towers stood directly above the Eastern District. If those structures collapsed, thousands would die. The prince immediately turned toward the exit passage, then staggered. Lyra caught him before he fell. His breath came rough against her shoulder. The poison was worsening again. The hatchling whimpered softly. Silver light flickered across Kale's skin, where Lyra touched him, slowing the dark veins briefly before fading once more. Seraphine noticed instantly. So that is the cost, she whispered. Kale's jaw tightened. Magnus frowned. What cost? The high priestess smiled bitterly. The prince's life is tied to the white flame now. Silence. Lyra's pulse stumbled. Seraphine looked almost triumphant, despite everything collapsing around her. The old celestial bonds were never simple mate ties. The dragons linked blood, soul, and flame together. Her eyes slid toward Kale. Now if the celestial heir dies... A pause. So does the prince. The cavern turned deadly still. Lyra slowly looked at Kale. He did not deny it. Pain cracked through her chest. Not because of destiny. Because he had known. Perhaps not fully. Enough to fear it. Enough to keep distance all these years. The prince finally spoke quietly. I learned the truth only after the hatchling bonded. But you suspected before? Lyra whispered. Kale looked away. That answer hurt most. The hatchling pressed gently against Lyra's cheek, as if sensing the fracture widening between them. Magnus folded his arms heavily. Then killing either of you risks collapsing what remains of the royal dragon bond entirely. Exactly, Seraphine snapped, which is why the celestial line should have ended centuries ago. The ancient dragon growled. The sound alone forced several priests backward. Lyra felt exhaustion, suddenly settling deep into her bones. Too much truth, too much power, too much fear directed at her all at once. Only hours ago she had been an oath-bound servant worried about polishing ceremonial armor before court gatherings. Now kingdoms trembled, because dragons answered her blood. It felt unreal. Worse, it felt lonely, because even now, Surrounded by kneeling nobles and ancient creatures, she did not know who saw her, and who only saw the white flame. Cale saw the exhaustion in her eyes immediately. Of course he did. His voice lowered carefully. "You need rest." Lyra almost laughed. The sound came out broken instead. "The kingdom is collapsing, and you are barely standing." Neither statement was false. Cale stepped closer despite the tension it caused among the court. The prince's gaze softened briefly when he looked at her burned wrists, the torn servant fabric still hanging from her shoulders, the trembling exhaustion she tried to hide. "You do not have to carry all of this tonight." The gentleness nearly undid her, because it arrived too late, too publicly, too dangerously. Before Lyra could answer, a wounded royal guard stumbled into the white vault from the upper stairwell. Blood covered half his armor. He dropped to one knee before Cale. "My prince." His breathing shook violently. "The western gates have fallen. Northern riders control the lower city." Magnus cursed beneath his breath. The guard swallowed hard. "And..." He hesitated. Cale's voice sharpened. "Speak." "The council has declared emergency succession." The cavern erupted. Lyra felt Cale go completely still beside her. Lord Valor looked horrified. "Without the prince present, the council claims the royal bond has failed." The guard lowered his gaze painfully. "They are preparing to crown Lord Malrek before dawn." Lyra's stomach turned cold. Malrek, Cale's uncle. The man who had spent years quietly gathering allies inside the court. The same uncle who publicly supported the Ember Temple at every royal gathering. Seraphine smiled faintly. Cale noticed, and finally understood the full scale of the betrayal. Not just temple ambition. Aku. The priestess had never intended to save the kingdom. She intended to replace the throne entirely. Kyle's voice became terrifyingly calm. "My uncle made alliance with you." Seraphine lifted her chin. "Lord Malrek understands stability better than you ever did. He understands fear. He understands survival." Cale laughed softly then, not with humor, with exhaustion. "Is that what you call this?" The white vault shook again, as another distant explosion rocked the city above. Magnus stepped forward sharply. "If Malrek claims the throne while the dragons remain unstable, every border kingdom will invade before winter ends. He will not hold the throne long." Lord Valor whispered. "No," Magnus agreed darkly, "because the dragons will tear the capital apart first." Silence followed. Then every gaze slowly turned toward Lyra. The meaning was unavoidable now. Only the white flame could stabilize the dragons. Only she could stop the kingdom from collapsing entirely. And everyone knew it. Lyra felt the weight settle over her shoulders instantly. Not chosen. Expected. Needed. The old wound twisted painfully inside her chest. All her life, people only noticed her when they required sacrifice. Cale saw the realization cross her face. His expression darkened immediately. "No." The court looked toward him. The prince stepped directly between Lyra and the nobles. "She owes this kingdom nothing." Shock rippled through the vault. Lyra stared at him. Kyle ignored everyone else now. His voice dropped lower, rougher. "They chained her, used her, hunted her." His eyes burned toward the kneeling court. "And now suddenly you kneel, because power frightens you." No one answered. Because he was right. Cale looked back at Lyra then. Not prince to servant. Not ruler to celestial heir. "Just Cale, you are free to leave this mountain." The words stunned her more than anything else tonight. Freedom. No command hidden inside it. No obligation. No guilt. Real choice. And somehow, that hurt worst of all. Because despite everything, part of her still wanted him to ask her to stay. The hatchling lifted its tiny head suddenly. Then the ancient dragon behind them growled low. Not anger. Warning. Every dragon in the white vault stiffened simultaneously. Magnus turned sharply toward the cavern entrance. What now? A scream echoed down the stairwell. Then another. Temple priests came stumbling into the vault covered in blood. Lord Malrek has... The royal dragons are attacking each other. He's trying to force a bond claiming. Cale's face changed instantly. Horror. True aurore. Lyra frowned. What does that mean? No one answered immediately. Then Lord Valor whispered shakily, if a false ruler attempts to seize the royal dragons during bond collapse, the old noble looked toward the storm above the shattered ceiling. The dragons will choose through blood. A terrible realization swept through the vault. Not the council. Not the temple. Not politics. The dragons themselves were about to decide the throne. And if they rejected Malrek publicly, the entire capital would descend into civil war before sunrise. For one terrible moment, no one in the White Vault moved. Then Cale turned toward the stairwell. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to reach the rookery before his uncle destroyed what little remained of the royal bond. Lyra saw it instantly in the prince's face. The calculation, the urgency, the exhaustion buried beneath sheer discipline. But the moment he took a step forward, the poison hit him again. Cale staggered hard against the fractured stone. Blood spilled from his mouth. Lyra caught him immediately. The entire vault watched in silence as the feared dragon prince nearly collapsed in her arms. And worse, the dragons felt it. Far above the mountain, another violent roar split the sky. The sound carried panic now. Agitation, instinct unraveling into chaos. The royal bond was failing faster. Cale forced himself upright through visible pain. I'm going to the rookery. You can barely stand, Magnus growled. Cale ignored him. Of course he did. The prince had probably been ignoring pain his entire life. Seraphine watched with cold satisfaction. You see now why weak bloodlines should not rule. The ancient celestial dragon snarled instantly. Stone cracked beneath its claws. Lyra felt fury stir through the white flame around her. Not because Seraphine insulted Cale, because she spoke about lives like pieces on a board. The high priestess had sacrificed servants, dragons, even kingdoms for the illusion of control. And somehow she still believed herself righteous. Cale stepped forward again. This time, Lyra grabbed his wrist. The contact sent silver light briefly through both of them. Cale froze. So did she. The bond reacted differently now. Stronger, closer, dangerously intimate. For one breath, Lyra felt his emotions clearly. Not thoughts, feelings, pain, exhaustion, fear, and beneath all of it, here. The prince looked at her slowly. The entire vault disappeared for a moment. No court, no dragons, no prophecy. Only the terrible awareness between them. You'll die before reaching the upper gates, Lyra whispered. Cale's jaw tightened. Then I'll die there instead of hiding below the mountain. The answer should not have affected her. It did, because that was who he was beneath the armor and restraint. A man who would burn himself alive before abandoning his people, even when they no longer deserved him. The hatchling suddenly climbed onto Cale's shoulder. The prince stiffened immediately. Silver light spread from the tiny dragon across the poisoned veins near his throat. The blackness receded slightly. Not cured. Stabilized. Cale inhaled sharply. Magnus stared openly now. The hatchling is feeding him celestial fire. Seraphine's face darkened with alarm. No, she snapped. The bond cannot deepen further. But it already had. Lyra could feel it. The white flame no longer recognized Cale as separate from her fate. And that frightened her almost as much as it frightened him. Above them, another explosion rocked the palace. The wounded royal guard stumbled forward desperately. Your Highness, if Lord Malrek forces the dragons into blood challenge before dawn, I know what happens, Cale said sharply. Lyra looked between them. Tell me. No one answered immediately. Finally, Lord Valor swallowed hard. The dragons will burn every false claimant alive until only the accepted bloodline remains. Silence followed. Lyra stared at Cale. Your uncle is willing to risk that. He thinks the dragons will choose him, Cale answered coldly. And if they don't? Cale's expression turned grim. Then half the capital dies with him. The White Vault quieted again beneath the weight of that truth. Thousands of innocent people trapped above, while nobles fought over bloodlines and prophecy. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. The old wound inside her twisted painfully. All her life, she had survived by enduring quietly, by lowering her head, by making herself useful enough to tolerate. But silence had never protected anyone. Not the celestial dragons, not the servant children, not Gael, and certainly not the kingdom now. When she opened her eyes again, the white flame responded instantly. Silver light spread softly through the cavern. The ancient dragon behind her lifted its massive head. Kale noticed immediately. His expression sharpened. "Lyra, I'm going to the rookery." "No." The answer came too quickly, too personally. Lyra turned toward him fully. "People are dying. You are not walking into a dragon blood challenge while the court barely understands what you are. They already fear me. That is exactly the problem." The prince stepped closer, despite the tension vibrating through the vault. His voice lowered. "Once the dragons see you publicly." His jaw tightened. "There will be no hiding what you are after tonight." The words hit harder than they should have. Not because he was wrong, because part of him still wished she could hide. Still wished she could remain untouched by the throne, the prophecy, the bloodlines tearing kingdoms apart. Lyra almost smiled sadly. "Too late." Seraphine suddenly laughed. A bitter, exhausted sound. "You still do not understand, do you?" Kyle's eyes snapped toward her murderously. But the priestess only looked at Lyra. The moment the white dragon hatched, your life ended. The cavern fell silent again. Seraphine stepped forward slowly, despite the celestial dragon watching her every movement. "You think the border kingdoms will allow a celestial queen to live freely? You think rival dragon courts will simply ignore ancient blood awakening after centuries?" Her expression darkened. "You are no longer a girl, child." The words struck cruelly because they were true. Lyra felt it now. The shift. The moment life split permanently into before and after. Before tonight, she had belonged nowhere. After tonight, every kingdom would try to claim or destroy her. KL moved instantly between them. "She is not your weapon." Seraphine's gaze sharpened. "And she is not yours." Something dangerous flashed across Kyle's face then. Not political anger. Personal. The kind men spent lifetimes trying to bury. His voice dropped low enough that only Lyra heard clearly. "I never wanted her to become part of this." The honesty nearly broke her. Because after all the silence, all the restraint, all the distance, she finally believed him. The hatchling chirped softly, then suddenly lifted its head toward the ceiling. The tiny dragon hissed. Every dragon in the White Vault reacted immediately. The ancient celestial beast rose to full height. Veyrath snarled. Even the northern dragon circling above shifted uneasily. Something was coming. Then a roar thundered down from the palace above. Not ordinary dragon fire. Bine. A dragon was dying. Kale's face lost all color. No. The prince moved before anyone could stop him. Despite the poison, despite exhaustion, despite everything, he sprinted toward the stairwell leading upward. And this time Lyra followed without hesitation. The White Vault erupted behind them as guards, nobles, northern riders, and dragons surged after the prince. Stone corridors shook violently beneath their feet, while smoke thickened the air overhead. The deeper they climbed toward the palace, the worse the destruction became. Collapsed walls, burned banners, bodies, some human, some dragon. The capital was tearing itself apart. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. These people had once looked through her like she was invisible. Now they stared as she passed. Some with awe, some with fear, some kneeling directly in blood-streaked corridors as the white flame glowed beneath her skin. The hatchling stayed curled around her shoulders the entire climb. Kale reached the upper rookery gates first, then stopped dead. Lyra reached him moments later, and understood why. The royal rookery was burning. Massive towers had collapsed inward around the mountain cliffs. Dragons circled wildly overhead through storms of ash and moonlight, while soldiers fled across shattered bridges suspended above the abyss. At the center of the chaos stood Lord Malrek. Kyle's uncle wore ceremonial dragon armor, dripping with blood. Around him, Dozens of royal guards knelt in terror, while 3 enormous dragons fought violently against invisible chains of crimson fire wrapped around their throats. Blood magic. Lyra felt the wrongness immediately. Malrek was forcing submission, not bonding, controlling. And beneath the crimson chains, the dragons were screaming. The sound hit Lyra like knives. Pain. Terror. Betrayal. Kale's voice became lethal. You used blood binding. Malrek turned slowly. He looked older than Kale by decades. Broad and regal, beneath silver-black armor lined with dragon bone. But unlike the prince, his smile carried no restraint at all. Only hunger. Nephew, Malrek said calmly. You survived. His gaze shifted toward Lyra, then toward the glowing crest over her heart. For the first time, real emotion cracked through his composure. Greed. Well, Malrek murmured softly. The temple legends were true. Kyle drew his sword. Dark dragonfire flickered weakly around the blade. You murdered your own dragons. Malrek barely glanced toward the chained beasts writhing behind him. I preserved the throne. The throne is not yours. Malrek's smile deepened slightly. The dragons disagree. As if answering him, one of the chained royal dragons suddenly shrieked in agony and collapsed onto the rookery stone. Dead. The sky exploded with dragon screams. Every beast above the capital lost control at once. Fire rained across the city. People screamed below. And Lyra felt the exact moment the kingdom began truly dying. The hatchling hissed violently. The white flame surged beneath Lyra's skin. Not anger, judgment. The dragons themselves were rejecting Malrek. And unless someone stopped him now, Verithel would burn before dawn. The death of the royal dragon shattered the night. Its final scream echoed across the mountain like a kingdom mourning its own execution. Far below the rookery cliffs, citizens fled through burning streets as dragonfire rained from the skies in violent bursts of panic and rage. And at the center of it all stood Lord Malrek, calm, unmoved. The crimson blood chains around the remaining dragons tightened as the beasts writhed against forced obedience. Ancient creatures born to bond freely now screamed beneath magic, ripped from torture rituals older than the Ember Temple itself. Lyra felt every ounce of their agony. The white flame burned violently through her veins, not demanding revenge, demanding balance. The hatchling hissed beside her shoulder, silver scales glowing brighter as the celestial bond responded to the suffering around them. Kale stepped forward slowly. Dark flames flickered weakly around his sword. The poison had drained much of his strength already, but the prince still radiated enough fury to make soldiers back away instinctively. You crossed blood law, Kale said coldly. Malrek smiled. Blood law is written by survivors. Behind him, another chained dragon collapsed against the rookery floor, roaring in agony as crimson runes carved into its scales glowed brighter. Lyra's stomach twisted. The dragon was bleeding from its eyes. Kale saw it too, and something inside him finally snapped. The prince moved faster than human sight. Dark dragonfire exploded across the rookery as Kale lunged toward his uncle, sword slashing through the storm-dark air with enough force to crack stone. Malrek met him instantly. Steel collided with fire. The impact shook the entire tower. Their flames erupted violently against one another. Kael's dark crimson against Malrek's unnatural blood-red magic. Sparks rained across the rookery while dragons screamed overhead. Kael drove his uncle backward immediately. Even poisoned, even weakened, he was stronger. Malrek knew it too, which was why he smiled. You always were father's favorite mistake. The words hit Kale harder than the blades. The prince faltered for one tiny heartbeat. Enough. Malrek slammed bloodfire directly into Kyle's wounded shoulder. The prince crashed across the rookery stones. Lyra ran toward him instinctively. Kyle, the hatchling screamed. White fire burst from its body toward the chained dragons nearby. The celestial flames touched the crimson restraints, and the blood chains shattered instantly. The freed dragon roared skyward, not in rage, relief. Every dragon above the capital reacted immediately. The storm shifted. Dozens of royal dragons suddenly turned away from civilians and toward the rookery instead, toward the white flame. Malrek's expression darkened for the first time. "There it is," he whispered. "The true danger." His gaze fixed fully on Lyra now. Not servant, not girl. Threat. The realization chilled her. This man would burn the entire kingdom before surrendering power. Kael forced himself upright again through visible agony. Blood ran down his arm freely now. The poison continued spreading. Yet the moment Malrek looked at Lyra, the prince stepped between them without hesitation. Something inside Lyra cracked painfully at the sight. Even now, even dying, he protected her first. Malrek sighed almost sadly. "You would throw away the throne for her?" Kael's answer came instantly. Yes. The entire rookery fell silent. Lyra stopped breathing. No hesitation. No political calculation. No denial. Just truth. The words struck harder than any confession could have. Malrek stared at his nephew for a long moment, then laughed softly. "And there it is." His eyes turned cruel. "The weakness that doomed your bloodline." Kael raised his sword again. "No," he said quietly. "The thing that saved it." The hatchling chirped softly beside Lyra. Silver light spread briefly through the storm, and suddenly every dragon circling above the capital began descending. Hundreds of them. Royal dragons. Northern beasts. Ancient cliff dwellers no rider had touched in years. They landed across the rookery towers surrounding the mountain, claws cracking stone, enormous wings folding beneath moonlight and ash. Not attacking. Watching. Waiting. Judging. The dragons themselves had come to witness the blood challenge. Fear swept through the remaining soldiers instantly, because everyone understood now. The throne would not be decided by nobles tonight, or temples, or councils. The dragons would choose. Malrek understood it too, which was why desperation finally replaced arrogance in his eyes. He raised both hands violently toward the storm above. Bloodfire erupted across the rookery. The remaining chained dragons screamed as Malrek forced their bonds deeper, draining life directly from them to strengthen himself. Lyra felt horror surge through the white flame. "He's killing them." Lord Valor's voice shook behind her. "The dragons cannot survive, forced claiming for long." Magnus Varric drew his axe slowly. "Then we end this now." Northern riders surged forward. Royal guards loyal to Kael followed instantly. Battle erupted across the rookery. Steel collided beneath dragonfire, while towers burned around them. Crimson magic ripped through the storm as Malrek unleashed bloodfire wildly across friend and enemy alike. He no longer cared who survived, only winning. Kael met him head-on. Their blades collided again and again through fire and smoke while dragons roared overhead. Every strike sent shockwaves through the rookery floor. But Lyra saw the truth no one else could. Kael was slowing. The poison weakened him with every breath. Malrek saw it too. The older dragon lord smiled viciously. "You're dying." Kael slammed him backward through a shattered pillar. "Then I'll kill you first." But the prince stumbled afterward. Just slightly. Enough. Malrek drove bloodfire directly into Kael's chest. The explosion hurled the prince across the rookery. Lyra screamed his name. Kael hit the stone hard and did not rise immediately. The bond inside her reacted instantly. Pain tore through her chest like claws. Not physical. Soul deep. The hatchling whimpered in terror. The white flame surged violently around Lyra as panic finally overwhelmed restraint. For one terrible heartbeat, she lost control. Silver fire exploded outward from her body in a massive storm. The entire mountain froze. Dragons lowered themselves instantly. Every single one. Royal, northern, wild, ancien, all bowed. The storm above Varethel split apart beneath white moonfire spiraling into the sky like a second dawn. And at the center of it stood Lyra. Not servant, not hidden heir. Queen. The realization crashed through the rookery like thunder. Even Malrek stepped backward. Fear finally entered his face. Lyra barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed entirely on Kyle. The prince slowly pushed himself upright through blood and ash, and when he looked at her now, there was no fear left in his expression, only awe and devastating devotion. The white flame responded instantly to that look. The glowing crest over Lyra's heart blazed brighter. Then something impossible happened. The ancient celestial dragon descended from the storm above. Its colossal silver-black wings spread across the burning rookery, while moonlight flooded the mountain in radiant white. The beast landed behind Lyra, with enough force to shake the capital itself. Then the dragon bowed its head beside her, publicly, before the entire kingdom. Gasps spread everywhere. Several nobles collapsed fully onto their faces, because there could no longer be denial. The celestial dragons had chosen their queen. Malrek roared in fury. No. Bloodfire erupted wildly around him as he drew power from the dying chain dragons one final time. Crimson lightning split the sky, while the older lord hurled himself toward Lyra with murder in his eyes. Kael moved instantly. Despite poison, despite exhaustion, despite death itself clawing through his veins, the prince intercepted his uncle before Malrek reached her. Their blades collided once more. Then Kael drove his sword straight through Malrek's chest. Silence crashed across the rookery. The older lord stared downward in shock. Kael's voice came rough and deadly quiet. You were never chosen by the dragons. Dark dragon fire erupted through the blade. Malrek screamed once, then dissolved into ash beneath the storm. The blood chains binding the remaining dragons shattered immediately. The freed beasts roared skyward in relief. And at that exact moment, Kael collapsed. Lyra caught him before he struck the stone. Panic seized her instantly. The poison had spread too far. Black veins covered nearly half his body now. His breathing weakened rapidly. The hatchling whimpered desperately. Around them, battle stopped entirely. Even dragons fell silent, because the prince was dying. Kael looked up at Lyra, through fading strength. Moonlight illuminated ash across his face, blood along his jaw. Exhaustion carved deep into every line of him. Yet when he looked at her, he still softened. "Hey," he whispered weakly. The simple tenderness shattered her completely. "You idiot," Lyra breathed through tears. "You're dying." A faint smile touched his mouth. "I noticed." The old pain inside her finally broke apart then. Years of silence, distance, loneliness, all of it collapsed beneath the terrifying possibility of losing him now. Lyra touched his face carefully. The white flame surged wildly through her body. The ancient dragon behind her lowered its massive head. The hatchling pressed against Kael's chest, and suddenly Lyra understood. The celestial bond had never been about domination, or crowns, or prophecy. It was trust freely given, choice, love strong enough to share power instead of hoard it. The white flame answered, not rulers, but devotion. Lyra leaned closer until her forehead rested against Kael's. Silver fire surrounded them both. The entire rookery held its breath. "I choose you," she whispered. The bond completed. Moonfire exploded across the mountain. White light surged through Kael's body, burning the poison away like ash in sunlight. The black veins vanished instantly. His dragon mark reignited brighter than ever before, not crimson this time, but silver, edged with black flame. The dragons roared together, not in fear, in celebration. Kael inhaled sharply as strength returned to his body. His eyes opened fully. Silver fire flickered briefly within them now, too. The prince stared at Lyra like he still could not believe she was real. Then slowly, before the entire kingdom, Kael Draven dropped to one knee before her. Not out of weakness, choice. The dragon prince bowed his head and spoke the words every noble dragon and rival kingdom would remember for generations. "My queen." The mountain erupted. Dragons screamed across the skies. Nobles knelt, and somewhere beyond the burning towers of Verithel, Kingdoms listening beneath distant mountains realized the same terrifying truth. The white flame had returned, and this time, she was no longer alone. No one in Verithel slept before dawn. The mountain itself seemed awake now. Dragons circled the capital through silver-lit skies, while the last fires consuming the lower districts slowly died beneath controlled flame. Snow began falling sometime after midnight, soft white ash mixing with winter frost across shattered rooftops and blood-stained stone bridges. And above the kingdom, standing at the center of the ruined rookery beside kneeling dragons and a prince reborn in silver fire, Lyra felt more alone than ever. The cheers had started first, then the kneeling, then the whispers. Queen, celestial air, white flame. The names spread through the capital faster than the fires. But beneath every stare, she still felt the same dangerous thing. Fear. Not all of them feared her equally. Some dragons bowed with reverence, some nobles with survival instinct, some soldiers with genuine awe. But many looked at her like kingdoms, always looked at power they could not control, like a future disaster waiting to happen. The old wound inside her understood that look too well. Kyle rose slowly from his knee before her. The silver-black fire now burning faintly beneath his dragon mark illuminated sharp exhaustion across his face. Though the poison had vanished completely, battle and blood loss still weighed heavily on him. Yet the moment his eyes met hers, everything else in the rookery disappeared. Not because of magic, because of relief. He was alive, and somehow that mattered to her more than crowns or dragons or the thousands kneeling below. The hatchling chirped softly from Lyra's shoulder. Kale's gaze flicked toward the tiny white dragon, then back to her. A faint smile touched his mouth for the first time that night. He likes you more. Lyra stared at him, then, unexpectedly, laughed. A real laugh. Small, broken, exhausted, but real. The sound stunned both of them, because it felt impossibly normal amid the ruins of a collapsing kingdom. Kale looked at her like he had discovered something precious, hidden beneath war. Then the moment shattered. Your Highness. Lord Valor approached carefully through the ruined rookery, stepping around cracked stone and dragon scorch marks. Behind him came northern riders, wounded guards, and nobles wearing expressions ranging from terrified to calculating. The old lord bowed deeply. To both of you. Lyra stiffened immediately. The title hurt, strangely. Not because she disliked respect, because she did not trust it. Kale noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders instantly. Of course he did. He stepped slightly closer beside her, not touching, not possessive, just present enough to remind the court she would not stand alone before them. The gesture nearly hurt more than the kneeling. Lord Valor cleared his throat uneasily. The council requests immediate audience before dawn. Kale's expression darkened. The council lost the right to request anything tonight. Several nobles lowered their eyes immediately. Good. They should. The prince looked over the ruined city, stretching below the mountain cliffs. Smoke still drifted through sections of the capital, while dragons perched atop towers like ancient judges observing human failure. How many dead? Kale asked quietly. The old lord hesitated. Too many. Silence settled heavily over the rookery. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. She could still feel fragments of dragon panic echoing through the white flame bond. Terror, grief, confusion. The beasts had suffered almost as deeply as the people below, and at the center of it all stood one terrible truth. This kingdom had been rotting long before tonight. Kale's uncle merely struck the final crack. Magnus Varric approached next, scarred face unreadable beneath drifting snow. The Beast King removed his gauntlets slowly before speaking. The northern riders are withdrawing from the lower districts. Several nobles looked startled. Kale narrowed his eyes slightly. You surrender quickly for an invading king. Magnus snorted. I came expecting political instability. His gaze shifted toward Lyra. Not the return of creatures my ancestors taught children to fear in bedtime stories. The ancient celestial dragon behind them growled low. Magnus looked unimpressed. Still ugly, he muttered toward the beast. The dragon narrowed one massive silver eye at him. Lyra almost smiled. Almost. but exhaustion crushed the feeling before it fully formed. Magnus noticed anyway. His expression softened slightly. You should rest, White Flame. The title again. Not Lyra. Never just Lyra anymore. Kael noticed the flicker of pain crossing her face. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. The prince turned sharply toward the gathered nobles. Enough titles tonight. Silence followed immediately. Kael's voice lowered dangerously. She has bled for this kingdom more honestly than half this court ever has. No one argued, because after tonight, very few people still possess the courage to oppose him openly. Not with silver fire burning beneath his dragon mark. Not with celestial dragons awake above the capital. Not with the White Flame standing beside him. Lord Valor bowed again carefully. Nevertheless, the throne must address the kingdom before sunrise. Kael looked toward Lyra, not commandingly, questioningly. The simple respect of it startled her. All her life decisions had been made around her, above her, despite her. Now an entire kingdom waited for her answer. The weight of it nearly suffocated her. I don't know what to say to them, she admitted quietly. Kael stepped closer, close enough that only she heard his next words clearly. Tell them the truth. Lyra laughed bitterly under her breath. That seems dangerous in this kingdom. Something painful flickered across his expression. Yeah, Kael murmured softly. It does. The honesty of it settled between them strangely. No crowns, no prophecy. Just two exhausted people standing in the ruins left behind by lies. The hatchling climbed from Lyra's shoulder onto Kael's armor suddenly. The prince froze instinctively as the tiny dragon curled against his neck. Silver fire flickered gently between them. The remaining nobles watched with stunned fascination, because the hatchling clearly adored him now. Kael looked almost offended by this development. He bites. The hatchling chirped proudly. Lyra stared, then laughed again despite herself. This time Kael smiled fully, and for one devastating moment, she saw the man he might have become in another life. Not prince, not weapon, not survivor, just someone capable of warmth without fear. The realization frightened her more than dragons, because she was beginning to understand how deeply he could hurt her. A scream suddenly echoed from below the rookery cliffs. Everyone turned instantly. A wounded servant girl stumbled onto the upper stairwell wrapped in soot-covered blankets. Lyra recognized her immediately. Mada, the missing child from the catacombs. The girl saw Lyra and burst into tears. You came back. Lyra immediately crossed the broken rookery toward her. The child clung desperately to her waist, trembling violently. They said the White Flame would eat the city, Mara whispered. But the dragons stopped burning when they saw you. The surrounding nobles exchanged uneasy looks. The story was already spreading. Myths formed quickly during fear. Lyra knelt carefully before the girl. Are you hurt? Mara shook her head quickly, then looked up at the glowing crest over Lyra's heart with wide eyes. You look like the queen from the old stories. The words struck harder than any title tonight, because they carried no politics, no fear, only wonder. Lyra swallowed carefully. I'm still me. Mara frowned slightly as children do when adults say foolish things. No, she whispered honestly. You're not. The old wound inside Lyra twisted painfully again, because the child was right. The servant girl who entered the throne hall in chains tonight no longer existed. Kael approached quietly behind her. His voice remained gentle. Neither am I. Lyra looked up at him slowly. The prince stood beneath falling snow with silver-black dragonfire flickering faintly beneath his skin, battle scars cutting through royal armor, exhaustion shadowing every sharp line of his face. Yet somehow, he looked freer than before. Perhaps because the truth no longer needed hiding. The hatchling chirped from his shoulder. The ancient celestial dragon watched silently from the shattered tower edge. And around them, nobles, soldiers, dragons, and rival kings waited to see what the White Flame would become. Destroyer, queen, savior, monster. The kingdom had not decided yet. Neither had she. Then, horns echoed across the capital. Deep, royal, The dawn summons. Every noble immediately stiffened. Lord Valor paled. The council has gathered the surviving houses. Kael's expression darkened instantly. They move quickly for men who nearly lost the kingdom tonight. They fear uncertainty. No, Magnus muttered. They fear her. The truth settled coldly across the rookery. The council was not gathering to celebrate. They were gathering to judge. Lyra felt it immediately. The same old pattern. Different chains. Different throne. Same fear. Kael saw understanding cross her face. His voice dropped low enough for only her to hear. You do not have to stand before them alone. The simple promise nearly broke her more than any battle tonight, because she believed him now, fully, and that was infinitely more dangerous than fear. Far below the mountain, the bells of Varethel rang through falling snow, while dragons circled the awakening dawn. The kingdom had survived the night, but the true war, the war for the throne, the white flame, and the future of dragonkind, had only just begun. Dawn rose cold and merciless over Varethel. The snow falling through the capital turned the burned streets pale beneath morning light, hiding blood beneath white frost, as though the mountain itself wished to forget what happened during the night. But dragons remembered. They lined the towers surrounding the royal palace now, enormous shadows perched against the gray sky like living warnings. Some belonged to noble houses, some to northern riders. Others, ancient creatures no one recognized at all, had descended from distant peaks before dawn and refused to leave. Waiting, watching, judging. Every citizen in the capital felt it. The old order had cracked open, and something far older stood beneath the ruins. Lyra walked through the palace corridors wearing borrowed black robes lined with silver fur. The servant dress from the night before had been ruined by blood, ash, and celestial fire. Yet despite the richer fabric now draped across her skin, she still felt like an intruder. The palace had changed overnight. Servants bowed when she passed. Guards lowered their heads. Nobles stepped out of her way with visible unease. No one ignored her anymore, and somehow that loneliness felt sharper than invisibility ever had. The hatchling padded quietly beside her through the corridor, tiny claws clicking softly against black marble. Every torch they passed dimmed into silver-white flame for a few breaths before returning to normal. The palace itself responded to the bond now. That frightened everyone. Kael walked beside her in silence. Fresh armor covered the worst of his wounds, though exhaustion still lingered heavily beneath his eyes. The silver-black fire marking his throat glowed faintly beneath the collar of his dark cloak. Different, changed. Like both of them had crossed some invisible line during the night, and could never fully return. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence between them no longer felt awkward. It felt dangerous, alive with things neither fully understood yet. Finally, Kael glanced toward her. You haven't eaten. Lyra almost smiled faintly. The kingdom was preparing to decide whether she deserved a throne or execution, and somehow he still noticed that. I wasn't hungry. That isn't the same thing. She looked at him carefully. Do you always sound this commanding before political disasters? Yes. A pause. Does it work? No. That finally pulled a soft laugh from her. Kael's expression changed instantly at the sound. Not visibly enough for most people. Enough for her. The prince looked away first. Coward. The realization startled her enough that warmth flickered unexpectedly through her exhaustion. Before either could speak again, the massive doors ahead opened. The throne chamber waited beyond, and the moment Lyra stepped inside, the room went silent. The royal court had gathered in full, despite the destruction across the capital. Surviving noble houses filled the black stone chamber beneath towering dragon banners, still stained by smoke from the night before. Some faces looked terrified, others calculating, a few openly hostile. At the center of the chamber stood the surviving council members surrounding the throne platform, but no one sat upon the throne itself. Interesting. The hatchling hissed softly beside Lyra. The nobles nearest the aisle immediately backed away. Good instinct. Lord Valor stepped forward first. Your Highness, Lady Lyra. Lady, not Queen. Note servant. The court still had not decided what to call her. Kale noticed too. His expression cooled instantly. The council requested audience. The prince said sharply, "Speak." An older noblewoman emerged, slowly from the gathered council. Lady Morel Thorne, one of the wealthiest dragon lords in the Western Territories. Sharp-eyed, elegant, dangerous. Lyra recognized her immediately as one of the few nobles who never openly mocked servants, mostly because she ignored anyone beneath her entirely. The woman bowed carefully. To the white flame. The title echoed uneasily through the chamber. Lyra felt the shift instantly. Not acceptance. Testing. Lady Morel studied her calmly. The kingdom requires clarity. Kale folded his arms. Then ask your questions plainly. The noblewoman inclined her head slightly. Very well. Her gaze settled fully on Lyra. Do you intend to claim the throne? Silence crashed through the hall. No one breathed. Even the dragons outside seemed quieter suddenly. Lyra stared at the council, at the nobles, at the throne standing empty beneath banners of a bloodline, now cracking apart beneath prophecy and fear. Then she answered honestly, I never intended any of this. Murmurs spread instantly. Lady Morel remained calm. That was not my question. Kyle stepped forward slightly. Careful. The noblewoman ignored him completely. Last night, every dragon in Verethel answered your fire, instead of the royal bloodline. Her voice sharpened. That changes the balance of every kingdom beyond these mountains. A northern lord rose from the side rows. The border clans will never accept a celestial queen. Another noble snapped back instantly. The dragons already have. Voices erupted throughout the chamber. Ancient law favors the white flame. Ancient law nearly destroyed the kingdom. She stabilized the dragons. She could control them. Better her than another blood tyrant. Silence. Kale's voice thundered across the throne hall, with enough force to still everyone instantly. The prince stepped onto the lower throne platform. Silver-black fire flickered faintly behind his eyes now. More dragon than before. More dangerous. And somehow, more alive. You speak about her, Kale said coldly, as though she is not standing in front of you. The shame that followed was brief, but real. Lyra felt it. Not enough. Still something. Lady Morel recovered first. Then perhaps she should speak for herself. Every gaze shifted toward Lyra again. The old wound twisted sharply inside her chest. All her life, people demanded explanations from her, while never listening to the answers. The servant girl, the hidden heir, the white flame. No one asked what she wanted. Not truly. Except Kale. The realization struck unexpectedly hard. Lyra slowly walked forward through the chamber. The hatchling followed at her side while dragons outside the palace shifted restlessly beneath the storm-gray sky. When she finally stopped before the throne platform, her voice came quiet. Steady. I do not want a kingdom built on fear. The hall remained silent. Lyra looked toward the nobles directly. You fear the white flame because you believe power only exists to control. Her gaze sharpened slightly. That says more about this court than it does about me. Several council members stiffened visibly. Good, Lyra continued. The dragons were dying before I touched the egg. The throne was already fracturing. The temple chained creatures beneath the mountain and called it peace. No one argued, because they couldn't. The kingdom survived last night because dragons chose mercy instead of revenge. Her voice lowered. Not because your court deserved it. The silence afterward felt heavy. Rough. Truth often did. Then one of the younger nobles rose abruptly. Lord Cassian Varys. Golden-haired. Beautiful. Cruel-eyed. Lyra recognized him immediately as one of Malrek's strongest supporters. The white flame speaks boldly for someone who carries no proven claim. Kale's expression darkened instantly, but Cassian continued, before interruption could come. The throne belongs to House Draven by blood. Ancient dragon myths do not erase succession law. The hatchling growled softly. Lyra felt tension spread through the chamber again. Cassian stepped forward boldly. If the dragons truly favor her, A dangerous smile touched his mouth. Then let them prove it publicly. Lord Valor Pelu. Cassian. But the younger lord looked directly at Lyra. The rite of flame. The throne hall erupted instantly. Several nobles stood in alarm. Even Kale's face hardened with sudden fury. No. The single word carried enough force to shake the chamber. Cassian smiled faintly. Interesting. Lyra frowned slightly. What is the rite of flame? No one answered immediately. That alone frightened her. Finally, Lady Morell spoke carefully. An ancient succession trial. Cassian's eyes gleamed. The dragons choose publicly before the kingdom. Kale stepped down from the throne platform instantly. You are not forcing her into a blood rite. Cassian shrugged smoothly. Then perhaps the prince fears what the dragons will reveal. The insult landed exactly where intended. Several nobles shifted uneasily, because beneath the provocation lay dangerous truth. The kingdom needed certainty, and uncertainty was where civil wars were born. Kale moved toward Cassian slowly enough that fear spread visibly through the younger lord's face. You speak very boldly for a man whose allies died traitors. Cassian held his ground. Barely. Then prove us wrong. His gaze flicked toward Lyra. Unless the white flame herself doubts the dragon's choice. The trap settled heavily across the throne hall. Lyra understood it instantly. If she refused the rite, the nobles would whisper weakness. If she accepted and failed, the kingdom would turn against her publicly. And if she succeeded, every rival kingdom beyond the mountains would declare war before winter ended. Kale looked at her sharply. You owe them nothing. Cassian smiled. That sounds dangerously close to fear, Your Highness. The prince's restraint snapped. Dragonfire exploded across the hall. Cassian slammed backward into a pillar hard enough to crack stone while silver-black flames wrapped around his throat. The entire court recoiled. Kale crossed the chamber in 2 terrifying steps and seized the younger lord by the collar. You mistake my patience for weakness. The dragons outside roared instantly in response to his fury. Lyra felt the white flame react too. Not violently, protectively. Toward him, toward her, toward both of them together. The bond was strengthening, and everyone in the hall saw it. Cassian stared at Kale, with genuine terror now. Yet even through fear, ambition still flickered behind his eyes. Then let the rite prove who truly rules the dragons. Kale looked ready to kill him. Lyra stepped forward carefully. Kyle. The prince froze instantly at her voice. Not because she commanded him, because he listened. The distinction stunned the entire court. Slowly, Kale released Cassian. The younger lord stumbled backward, breathing hard. Lyra looked toward the throne, toward the watching nobles, toward the kingdom, trembling between old blood and something new. Then she made the choice that would change everything. I'll take the rite of flame. The entire throne hall went silent. Kale turned toward her sharply. Lyra. She met his gaze steadily. If the dragons choose truth. Her voice softened slightly. Then let the kingdom see it. Fear flickered across his expression. Not for the throne, for here. And somehow that frightened her more than the rite itself. Because she was beginning to realize the one thing truly capable of breaking her heart in this kingdom was no longer the court. It was him. The rite of flame was held at sunset, because dragons judged best beneath dying light. That was what the old laws claimed. By noon, the entire capital already knew. The white flame would stand before the dragons, and either the kingdom would kneel or burn. Verithel transformed into something tense and breathless as the hours passed. Bells echoed through frozen streets while surviving nobles rushed through palace corridors in ceremonial black. Dragon riders circled constantly above the mountain to prevent riots from spreading through the lower districts. No one spoke loudly anymore. Fear had changed shape. Last night, people feared chaos. Tonight, they feared judgment. Lyra stood alone in the eastern tower chamber, overlooking the capital. Snow drifted beyond the enormous arched windows, while dragons crossed the sky beneath fading gray clouds. The hatchling slept curled beside the hearth, peacefully, like it had not helped reshape kingdoms before dawn. Lyra envied that simplicity. A knock sounded softly at the chamber door. She already knew who it was. "Come in." KL entered quietly. No armor this time. Only dark ceremonial robes edged with silver flame across the collar and wrists. His black hair still looked slightly damp from the healing baths the royal physicians forced on him earlier. Yet despite the softer appearance, danger still radiated from him now. Not cruelty, power. The completed celestial bond had changed him. The court whispered about it already. The prince who once carried crimson fire now wielded silver-black flame no dragon lord recognized. And every whisper carried the same question beneath it. Was Kael still entirely human? Lyra understood that fear too well. Kael closed the chamber doors behind him. Neither spoke immediately. The silence between them felt different now. Fragile, heavy with things neither dared touch directly. Finally, Kael looked toward the city below. They're gathering early. Lyra stepped beside him at the window. Thousands of people already crowded the lower arena terraces surrounding the right grounds. Even from this height, she could see banners snapping through the snowstorm winds. Royal black, temple crimson, northern gray, and among them now, white. Someone had sewn new banners overnight. The sight unsettled her deeply. Kael noticed immediately. "You hate it." Lyra laughed softly under her breath. "I hate how quickly people worship whatever frightens them." His gaze shifted toward her. "That isn't worship." "No?" Kael was silent for a moment. Then, quietly, "No, it's hope." The answer caught her off guard, because he sounded almost bitter saying it. Lyra studied him carefully. "You don't trust hope." "I trust survival." "That sounds lonely." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You noticed." The softness of it twisted painfully through her chest. Kael moved closer to the window beside her. Outside, dragons circled the palace towers like living storms. "You can still refuse the right." Lyra looked at him slowly. "You already know I won't." His jaw tightened slightly. The prince stared toward the arena below, while snowlight reflected across the silver fire beneath his throat. "I know." There it was again. That terrible restraint. Not command. Not arrogance. Fear. Kael feared losing her more than losing the throne, and the realization frightened both of them. Lyra looked away first. "The court would never stop doubting me otherwise. The court doubts everyone. They doubted you too." A shadow crossed his expression briefly. "Still do." The honesty hurt, because despite his power, despite the dragons, despite the crown, Kael had never truly belonged to the kingdom either. He simply wore loneliness better than she did. The hatchling stirred beside the fire suddenly, then lifted its head sharply toward the chamber doors. A second later, another knock echoed softly. Kael's expression cooled instantly. "Enter." Lady Morel stepped inside. The noblewoman bowed carefully, though her sharp eyes studied both of them far too intelligently. "The arena preparations are complete." Kael nodded once, but Morel hesitated. "Interesting." "What?" Kael asked. The noblewoman's gaze shifted toward Lyra. "The surviving temple priests are demanding participation in the rite." Kael's face darkened immediately. "Denied. They claim ancient law grants the Ember Temple authority during dragon succession trials. The Ember Temple lost authority when they betrayed the throne." Morel folded elegant hands before her. "Many nobles agree with you." A pause. "Some do not." Of course. The court remained divided. Fear always created factions. Kael turned away sharply toward the window again. "What does the council truly want?" Morel was silent for one dangerous heartbeat too long. "Then, they want certainty." Kael laughed once without humor. "And if the dragons choose Lyra publicly?" The noblewoman met his gaze steadily. "Then half the kingdom will kneel." Her voice lowered slightly. "And the other half will begin preparing for war." The room quieted. Lyra had already known. Hearing it aloud still chilled her. Morel looked toward her carefully now. "Border kingdoms are already sending ravens." The hatchling growled softly. Kael's jaw tightened. "How many?" "Too many." The noblewoman stepped closer toward the window overlooking the arena below. The Eastern empires want alliance marriages. Disgust flickered across her elegant face. The southern dragon courts demand proof the white flame truly returned. A pause, and the Frostclaw territories have already offered bounties. Lyra went still. Bounties? On celestial blood. Kael's expression became murderous instantly. Silver-black fire flickered across his hands. Lady Morel spoke quickly before his temper fully snapped. The bounty offers came from lesser border houses, not kings. I don't care if they came from starving peasants, Kael said coldly. Anyone hunting her dies. The absolute certainty in his voice silenced the room. No politics. No hesitation. Just promise. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. Morel noticed. Too perceptive. The noblewoman lowered her gaze politely enough to pretend she hadn't. Smart woman. The arena awaits, she said softly before leaving. The chamber doors closed again. Silence returned. Heavy. Dangerous. Kael exhaled slowly. This is exactly what I feared. Lyra looked toward him carefully. The kingdoms? You becoming a target. The simplicity of the answer nearly shattered her composure. Not the throne. Not prophecy. Here. Kael finally faced her fully. The fading winter light illuminated exhaustion across his sharp features. But something else burned there now, too openly to ignore anymore. Devotion. Terrifying in its intensity. I spent years trying to keep you hidden from this court. Lyra's breath caught slightly. And now, his expression darkened painfully. Now the entire world knows your name. The vulnerability in his voice stunned her more than any confession could have. Kael Draven feared almost nothing. Except this. Except her being hurt because of him. The realization settled deep inside her chest. Varm. Dangerous. Real. Before she could answer, horns echoed through the palace grounds below. The right summons. The hatchling stood immediately. So did Kael. The moment had arrived. By sunset, the dragons would decide the future of Verithel publicly before the kingdom. And if the rite failed, civil war would follow before dawn. Kael crossed the chamber toward her slowly, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin again through the bond. Silver-black fire flickered faintly beneath his throat. The mark answered her presence, instinctively. Lyra hated how much that affected her. Kael lifted one hand carefully. Not touching. Waiting. Choice. Always choice now. Her chest ached unexpectedly at the respect in that simple hesitation. Slowly, Lyra placed her hand in his. The bond ignited instantly. Not violently. Warmly. The hatchling chirped happily beside them. Kael's fingers tightened slightly around hers, and for one devastating heartbeat, the prince looked less like a ruler and more like a man, trying very hard not to love someone too openly. That frightened her most of all, because she was no longer certain she could stop herself from loving him back. The arena thundered by the time they arrived. Thousands filled the massive stone terraces carved directly into the mountainside below the palace. Snow swirled through enormous braziers burning silver and crimson along the outer walls, while dragons lined the cliffs surrounding the rite grounds like ancient gods come to witness judgment. The moment Lyra stepped onto the arena platform, the crowd fell silent. Not gradually. Instantly. Every eye locked onto the glowing crest beneath her throat. The hatchling beside her. The celestial dragon circling overhead through the storm. Fear rolled through the crowd like cold wind. But beneath it, Wunder. Kael walked beside her toward the center dais. And the moment the people saw the silver-black fire burning beneath his dragon mark, whispers exploded across the arena. The prince changed. The white flame touched him. He carries celestial fire now. The old laws were unraveling publicly before everyone's eyes. At the center platform stood the ancient rite flame itself. A colossal brazier carved from dragon bone and obsidian stone. Dark, cold, dormant for centuries. Lord Valor stepped forward shakily. The rite of flame recognizes only truth between dragon, ruler, and blood. Temple survivors stood watching from the lower terraces. Northern riders lined the upper walls. Nobles crowded the royal platform. And high above them, every dragon in Verithel circled beneath the storm-dark sky, waiting. Valor's voice echoed through the arena. If the dragons reject the claimant, his throat tightened visibly, the right flame will consume them. The crowd stirred uneasily. Lyra stared at the cold brazier. No fear. Oddly enough, that frightened her more, because somewhere between servant chains and celestial fire, she had stopped fearing death. Kale stepped closer beside her. Too close for court comfort. Good. Let them whisper. His voice dropped low enough for only her to hear. If anything feels wrong, I stop the rite. Lyra looked at him. You can't. Watch me. Despite everything. Despite kingdoms, dragons, prophecy, and war. She smiled, and Kale looked utterly ruined by it. Then Lord Valor raised the ceremonial torch toward the sky. The dragons roared together, and the rite of flame began. The ceremonial torch touched the ancient brazier. Nothing happened. For one long, terrible heartbeat, the arena remained frozen beneath falling snow. Then, the rite flame awakened. Silver fire erupted upward in a massive spiral that split the darkening sky above the mountain. The force of it sent icy wind roaring across the arena terraces, while dragons screamed overhead in answer. The crowd recoiled instantly. Some nobles fell to their knees. Others backed away from the heatless celestial fire twisting through the storm like living moonlight. Lyra stood at the center of it all. The white flame answered her immediately. The glowing crest beneath her throat pulsed softly beneath silver light, while ancient symbols ignited across the stone beneath her feet. The hatchling chirped beside her, and every dragon in the sky descended lower. Watching, judging, Lord Valor's voice shook as he recited the old rite. Let blood stand before flame. His hands trembled around the ceremonial staff. Let dragons witness truth. Kyle remained beside Lyra, despite the nobles already whispering uneasily about it. Traditionally, claimants stood alone. The prince clearly did not care. Cassian Viris noticed immediately. The young noble stepped forward from the council platform, with a smile too sharp to trust. The rite forbids interference. Kyle's gaze shifted toward him slowly. The temperature in the arena seemed to drop instantly. I am aware. Cassian lifted his chin slightly. Then perhaps the prince should stand apart from the claimant. Several nobles murmured agreement. Cowards. They feared what Kale's presence beside her symbolized more than the white flame itself. Unity. The bond. A throne no longer divided. Kyle looked ready to burn the entire arena down from irritation alone. Lyra touched his wrist gently before he could answer. Silver fire flickered softly beneath both their skin. The contact alone silenced nearby whispers. Kyle looked at her immediately. I'll be fine, she said quietly. The prince's jaw tightened. You don't know that. No, she admitted softly. But I know this kingdom needs to see the dragons choose freely. Something painful crossed his face. Not disagreement. Helplessness. Because protecting her and respecting her choices were becoming opposite things. And Kale hated it. Slowly, he stepped back from the central dais. The moment distance formed between them, Lyra felt the bond pull sharply inside her chest. The prince felt it too. His expression hardened instantly. Interesting. The bond disliked separation. Cassian noticed. Of course he did. Ambition sharpened instantly in his eyes. Dangerous man. Lord Valor continued the rite before tension could worsen further. Let the dragons witness the soul beneath the blood. The silver flames surrounding the brazier suddenly surged toward Lyra. The arena gasped. The fire wrapped around her body in spiraling ribbons of moonlight. Not burning. Searching. The white flame moved through her memories like living instinct. Servant corridors. Cold winter nights. Years of invisibility. Carrying wounded dragons when no noble handlers cared enough to touch them. Feeding Kale's dragon by hand after battle, because the beast trusted no one else. Loneliness. Kindness. Endurance. The arena watched silently as the celestial fire revealed pieces of her life through shimmering visions above the brazier. No lies. No performance. Truth. A servant girl, kneeling beside dying hatchlings, while nobles ignored them. A young prince silently placing his cloak around her shoulders during a winter storm. A lonely child sleeping beside palace kitchens because no one remembered she existed. The crowd quieted further with every memory, because the white flame revealed, not power first, character. And the kingdom did not know what to do with goodness that survived suffering without becoming cruel. Kael watched the visions with visible pain in his eyes. He had not known everything, not how alone she truly was. Lyra felt it through the bond. A regret, fierce enough to ache. Then, the flames changed. The visions darkened. The white vault. The chains. The celestial dragon imprisoned beneath the mountain. Temple priests driving hooks into silver scales, while ancient beasts screamed beneath darkness. Horror swept through the arena instantly. The surviving temple priests went pale. Several nobles turned toward them with revulsion. Lord Valor whispered shakily, "The gods preserve us." The white flame showed everything. No history rewritten. No temple lies hidden. Seraphine stood among the lower terraces wrapped in crimson robes despite imprisonment. And for the first time since the night before, fear truly entered her eyes. Because the kingdom was seeing the truth publicly now. The silver fire surged higher. New visions emerged. Malrek forcing blood chains into royal dragons. Kael collapsing beneath poison while shielding Lyra from arrows. The prince kneeling before her willingly atop the burning rookery. Gasps spread through the arena. The moment played again through celestial fire above them. Not humiliation. Devotion. Kael's expression darkened immediately as thousands witnessed the scene, but the dragons circling overhead roared approvingly. The bond between ruler and flame had been witnessed. Accepted. Cassian stepped forward sharply. This proves nothing. The crowd turned uneasily. The young noble pointed toward the visions with forced confidence. Emotion is not succession law. The dragons above the arena growled. Several. At once. Cassian paled slightly. Still, ambition drove him onward. The right demands dragon judgment, not sentimental memory. Lord Valor looked uncertain. Ancient law was unclear. The right flame had not awakened in centuries. No one fully remembered its rules anymore. Then, suddenly, the ancient celestial dragon descended from the storm. The massive beast landed atop the arena cliffs, with enough force to shake the entire mountain. Silver-black scales shimmered beneath falling snow while ancient scars lined its enormous body like battle history carved into living stone. The crowd panicked immediately. Many dropped to their knees outright. The dragon ignored all of them. Its silver eyes remained fixed entirely on Lyra. Then the creature did something no dragon in recorded history had ever done publicly. It lowered its head fully before her. Not to a rider. Not to a ruler. To its queen. The arena exploded into terrified whispers. Even northern riders looked shaken now. Because dragons did not kneel. Not willingly. Not ever. Cassian's face drained of color. Still, he pushed forward desperately. No. He pointed upward wildly. The beast is corrupted by celestial blood. The moment the words left his mouth, every dragon above the arena roared. The sound hit like divine wrath. Cassian stumbled backward in terror. And suddenly, Lyra understood something important. The dragons were not merely observing the rite. They were listening, judging. Not just her. Everyone. The white flame flared brighter around her body. Then the silver fire suddenly split. Half spiraled around Lyra. The other half surged toward Kael. The arena gasped collectively. The prince stiffened as celestial fire wrapped around him too. The bond pulsed violently between them. The right flame was recognizing them together. Cassian looked horrified. Lord Valor nearly dropped the ceremonial staff. This was never part of the old rite. But the dragons approved. Their roars shook the mountains. Kael stared at the celestial fire surrounding his body with visible disbelief. Then at Lyra. Understanding hit both of them simultaneously. The throne was no longer choosing between prince and white flame. The dragons had already decided. Together. The realization terrified the court, because united, they became something far more dangerous than prophecy alone. A kingdom reborn. Cassian understood too, which was why desperation finally overpowered caution. The young noble drew a hidden dagger from beneath his cloak and lunged directly toward Lyra. Everything happened instantly. Kael moved first. Silver-black dragonfire exploded across the arena as the prince crossed the dais in a blur of flame and fury. But the dragons reacted faster. Every dragon above the right ground screamed at once. The sky itself seemed to split apart beneath their rage. Cassian froze mid-step. Then silver fire erupted from the right flame itself. The celestial blaze wrapped around the noble's body without touching flesh. Judgment. Cassian screamed, not in pain. Terror. The white flame was showing his memories publicly now. Secret meetings with Malrek. Bribes exchanged beneath temple halls. Orders to poison royal hatchlings months before the coup. The arena erupted in horror. Lord Valor stared in disbelief. You killed the hatchlings. Cassian collapsed onto the stone platform, shaking violently. No. The white flame surged brighter. More memories. Servants murdered to hide evidence. Dragon eggs shattered secretly beneath palace towers. Temple gold exchanged for noble support. The crowd recoiled in disgust. Kael's face became death itself. Cassian looked toward the nobles desperately. Please. No one moved to help him. Because now, the dragons knew. And in Verethel, dragon judgment was feared more than execution. The silver fire finally released him. Cassian collapsed, sobbing onto the arena floor. Ruined. Exposed. The right flame dimmed slightly. Then every dragon in the sky lowered itself simultaneously toward Lyra and Kael. Thousands of people watched in stunned silence as the dragons bowed. All of them. Royal. Northern. Wild. Ancien. The judgment was complete. Lord Valor's voice broke as he spoke the ancient final words. The dragons have chosen. Silence followed. Then the crowd began kneeling. Not out of fear now. Not entirely. Some still feared. But many looked at Lyra differently now. Not weapon. Not threat. Protector. And Kael. Kael looked at her like she had just rewritten the fate of his entire bloodline. The prince slowly crossed the arena toward her, through silver fire and falling snow. When he reached her, the crowd fell completely silent again, because the look in his eyes was no longer hidden. No restraint remained. No denial. Only love fierce enough to terrify him. Kael touched her face gently before the entire kingdom. And this time, he did not pull away. Snow fell silently across the right grounds. Thousands remained kneeling beneath the storm-dark sky, while silver fire spiraled around the ancient brazier like living moonlight. Dragons lined the mountain cliffs surrounding the arena, enormous shadows bowing their heads toward the center platform where the old laws had finally awakened again. But Lyra barely noticed any of it, because Kael was still touching her face, gently, carefully, like she was something precious enough to break him. The arena watched, in complete silence. No prince of House Draven had ever shown affection publicly. Not tenderness. Not vulnerability. Certainly not toward a woman the kingdom chained less than 2 nights ago. Yet, Kael stood before the entire court, with silver-black dragonfire flickering beneath his throat, and looked at her like nothing else in the world mattered more. The realization terrified her, because she looked back the same way. The hatchling chirped softly between them. That tiny sound finally shattered the frozen silence across the arena. Whispers erupted instantly. The right accepted them both. The dragons chose a united throne. The white flame restored the bloodline. Some voices still carried fear. Others carried awe. But no one denied the judgment anymore. They couldn't. The dragons themselves had spoken. Lord Valor slowly lowered himself fully onto one knee before the central dais. Then Lady Morell followed. Then Magnus Varric. And one by one, noble houses throughout the arena began kneeling beneath the snow. Not perfectly. Not universally. Several Eastern lords remained standing. Temple loyalists looked sick with fury. A few nobles whispered urgently among themselves, already calculating future rebellions. But the balance had shifted. The kingdom could feel it. Kael finally lowered his hand slowly from Lyra's face. The loss of warmth startled her more than it should have. His expression softened slightly at whatever he saw in her eyes. Then the prince turned toward the arena and became dangerous again. "The Rite of Flame has spoken," Kael declared coldly. "Any challenge against the White Flame is now challenge against the dragons themselves." The statement thundered through the crowd. Several nobles immediately lowered their heads further. Smart. Cassian still lay collapsed near the brazier, broken beneath exposed memories and dragon judgment. Royal guards dragged him away through the snow while the arena watched in silence. No one pitied him, because everyone understood now. The White Flame did not merely reveal power, it revealed truth. And truth frightened kingdoms far more than fire ever could. Lady Morell rose carefully first. "The council accepts the judgment of the right." A murmur spread instantly. Political survival. The noblewoman moved quickly. Kael noticed too. His expression remained unreadable, but Lyra saw faint approval flicker beneath it. Morell was dangerous because she adapted faster than most nobles. That kind of intelligence survived changing kingdoms. Lord Valor stepped beside her shakily. "By ancient dragon law," he swallowed carefully, "the celestial heir and bonded sovereign now stand recognized before crown, flame, and blood." The title echoed heavily across the arena. Bonded sovereign. Not king. Not queen. Something older. Older even than House Draven. The dragons roared again overhead. Approval. The hatchling climbed happily onto Kael's shoulder. "Traitor." The prince looked mildly offended by the tiny dragon's growing attachment. Lyra almost smiled. Almost. Because beneath the relief flooding the arena, danger still lingered sharply in the air. The eastern nobles remained standing, and their eyes looked calculating. Kael noticed immediately. Of course he did. The prince stepped slightly closer beside her again. Subtle enough for the crowd. Protective enough for her. "Stay near me," he murmured quietly. Lyra glanced sideways at him. "You say that like trouble follows me." Kael's expression deadpanned. Trouble rides celestial dragons and terrifies kingdoms. That actually pulled a laugh from her. The crowd noticed instantly, and the effect shocked them more than the dragons. Because the White Flame laughing sounded human. Varm. Alive. Not divine. Not monstrous. The old wound inside her eased slightly at the realization. Maybe she had not entirely lost herself yet. Then the arena horns sounded sharply. 3 long blasts. Warning. Magnus Varric turned instantly toward the outer cliffs. That isn't a palace signal. Northern riders were already reaching for weapons. Dragons above the arena shifted uneasily. Then a scout dragon descended through the snowstorm and landed violently near the outer terraces. Its rider barely managed to dismount before collapsing onto one knee. "Ships," the rider gasped. "Eastern war banners in the southern fjords." The arena exploded into panic again. Lady Morell paled. "Already?" Kael's face hardened instantly. "How many?" "At least 40 dragon carriers." The rider swallowed hard. "And more still arriving beyond the ice waters." The Eastern empires moved faster than expected. Of course they did. The White Flame awakening had announced itself across the continent, and now every kingdom would rush to either claim the White Flame or destroy her before she fully stabilized the dragons. Magnus cursed softly beneath his breath. The scavengers arrive. Lyra felt the atmosphere shift around the arena immediately. Fear again. Not internal this time. External. The kingdom had barely survived one night of civil collapse. Now foreign powers approached before the ashes even cooled. Kael stepped forward toward the arena edge, overlooking the capital below. Snow whipped violently around him while dragons roared through darkening skies. "The city defenses?" Lord Valor answered quickly. "Damaged but standing. Dragon riders? Half injured. Many beasts remain unstable." Kael's jaw tightened. The prince understood the truth immediately. Varethel was vulnerable. Worse, everyone knew it. Lady Morel looked toward Lyra carefully now. They come for the white flame. The directness of it chilled the arena. No more pretending. No more political softness. The kingdoms beyond the mountains saw her as power to possess. Kael's expression turned lethal instantly. "No one touch her," Magnus snorted. "Tell that to the Eastern Emperors." The Beast King crossed his scarred arms heavily. "You stabilized your throne tonight." His gaze darkened toward the southern horizon. "Now, you must survive the kingdoms, terrified by it." Lyra felt exhaustion pressing against her bones again. The right, the dragons, the truth exposed publicly before thousands. And now war fleets approached already. She suddenly understood why the old celestial queens disappeared beneath blood and fire. Not because they lacked power, because kingdoms never stopped hunting what they feared. The hatchling sensed her unease immediately. It pressed softly against her neck. Varm, trusting. Kael noticed too. Without thinking, the prince reached for her hand again. The moment their fingers touched, the dragons overhead calmed. The shift happened instantly enough that nearby nobles gasped. The bond soothed them. Not controlled, reassured. Magnus stared openly now. "Well," the Beast King muttered, "that certainly complicates rebellion." Kael ignored him completely. His attention remained fixed on Lyra. "You need rest." She stared at him in disbelief. "There are invasion fleets approaching, and you're exhausted." The absurdity of it almost made her laugh again. The prince looked infuriatingly serious. Lyra shook her head softly. "You nearly died 3 times yesterday." "Yes." "And you're lecturing me?" "Yes." The hatchling chirped approvingly. "Traitors. All of them." Before Lyra could answer, the ancient celestial dragon descended from the cliffs again. The massive beast landed directly beside the central dais, silver-black wings folding slowly through the snowstorm. The crowd recoiled instinctively. The dragon ignored everyone except Lyra, then lowered itself, waiting. The arena quieted immediately. Kael looked toward the beast carefully. "He wants you to ride." Lyra blinked. "What?" The prince's mouth twitched slightly. "He's impatient." The celestial dragon growled low, as if offended by the accusation. The crowd watched breathlessly, because no celestial dragon had accepted a rider in recorded history. Lyra approached the enormous creature slowly. The dragon lowered one wing toward the stone platform. "Invitation." Her pulse quickened sharply. "You cannot be serious." Kael stepped beside her. Too close again. Always too close lately. His voice lowered gently. "He trusts you." That frightened her more than dragons ever had. Trust. Choice. The thing she had spent her life surviving without. The hatchling climbed onto the great dragon's lowered wing happily. Completely unhelpful creature. The crowd stirred nervously as Lyra slowly touched the celestial dragon's scales again. Varm. Ancien. Alive beneath her fingertips. Then the dragon lowered further. Waiting. Kael watched her carefully. And suddenly she understood something important. He was afraid too. Not of the dragon. Of her leaving. The realization struck hard enough to steal breath from her lungs. Because if she climbed onto that dragon publicly, nothing about her old life would survive afterward. No more servant halls. No more hiding. No more being small enough to ignore. Only the white flame. Queen. Symbol. Target. Kael saw hesitation cross her face. His expression softened painfully. "You don't have to do this today." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her completely. Lyra looked at the waiting dragon, at the kneeling kingdom, at the storm-dark skies where foreign war fleets already approached the horizon, then back at Kael, and for the first time since the white flame awakened, she stopped wishing to return to who she used to be. Slowly, Lyra stepped onto the celestial dragon's wing. The arena held its breath. The ancient beast rose beneath her gracefully. Massive silver-black wings unfurled against the snowstorm. Then, the dragon launched skyward. The crowd erupted. Dragons answered instantly across the capital. And high above the kingdom, with freezing wind tearing through her hair and the white flame burning beneath her skin, Lyra looked down at Verithil beside Kale, flying on Veirath beneath her. Not servant, not hidden, no chains, only sky. And for the first time in her entire life, she finally understood what freedom felt like.